Hello everyone, and welcome to another amazing story. What if Doomslayer was in My Hero Academia? This amazing story was written by reeleffendeel. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Chapter 27. Behind the Scenes. Mizuta General Hospital. 8th floor. Toshinori Yagi stood in the hallway like a statue, holding the force stand in his left hand as he ignored the orderlies walking past him. Before Yagi was a full-view window spanning the length of the hallway that showed the intensive care section of the hospital. There were rows and rows of hospital beds with unconscious heroes lying upon them, covered in bandages and occasionally wincing in pain as doctors and nurses tended to them. To see this many pro-heroes in the hospital brought back terrible memories of the Esaha disaster, when Volcano of the Volcano Thieves reduced the entire city into lava-flooded no-man's land that almost cost Endeavor his life. But this was different. Far different. One man defeated all of these heroes. The same man who single-handedly destroyed the entire Steel Sabers organization and fought him to a standstill. Such an act was borderline impossible. Even if Yagi were in his prime, he would still get overwhelmed by the sheer number of quirks at the hand of professional heroes, some of which were top-ranked in their home countries. But the vigilante made a complete mockery of their powers. Aizawa explained that everything they threw at him did not even so much as leave a scratch on his armor. Toshinori brought up his hand and slowly clenched it into a fist. He was giving it all he had in his fight against the vigilante, but all he managed to do was leave several dents and a fist indentation upon his opponent's armor. What kind of material was that suit made out of? But one indisputable fact remained in Yagi's mind. The vigilante was holding his true strength back. That man refrained from killing any of the heroes sent to capture him and save the hostages. Even when he fought the vigilante, Yagi could feel the restraint behind those blows. Maybe, just maybe, there was some humanity within that vigilante. But what he did to the Sabers was the stuff of nightmares. Yagi coughed into his hand in a brief fit and looked down at his palm after the coughs had subsided. There were small flecks of blood coating his skin, causing him to grimace. He was running out of time. Yagi, he heard someone say along with footsteps. He turned his head to the left and witnessed Sayaka, Mera, Nizu, and Recovery Girl approaching him. Toshinori could only manage a nod as a thin line of blood dribbled down his chin. Nizu dug out a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it up to Yagi, who took it and wiped the blood from his lips. Sorry for the late arrival. We had to wade through those meat-picking media vultures outside the hospital. Mera said, jabbing a thumb over his shoulder. Can't say I blame you. Yagi replied as he looked back at the window. Everyone stood next to him as they observed the unconscious heroes laying on rows of beds that stretched to the other end of the room. Sayaka picked up Nizu and held him near the window so he could see. The mouse man's expression was unreadable, though he was visibly tensing up. This is terrible, Nizu lamented. Mera shook his head. It'll be months before they're back on duty. A worst-case scenario if there ever was one. I wouldn't exactly say that, Recovery Girl announced. The wounds may look severe at first glance, but what confuses me is that aren't crippling despite the way they look. So far we only have minor fractures, abrasions, a few sprains, and light contusions, but they look worse than they should. It doesn't make any sense. The vigilante was holding his strength back. Yagi confirmed, much to the surprise of Chio and Nizu. He didn't want to hurt any of the heroes, so he chose to incapacitate them instead. When I fought him, I was giving it everything I had, and he restrained himself throughout the whole fight. That was a tremendous cause for concern for the UA principal. Are you saying he was stronger than you? Yes. Then again, it may be impossible just to measure how strong he is. Yagi confirmed. But despite his brutality upon the Sabers, he still held himself back. Nizu rubbed his chin inquisitively. While he was still shocked at the knowledge that there was a dangerous vigilante far stronger than All Might on the loose, the fact that the man had no intention of killing any heroes was a cause of interest for Nizu. Perhaps there was more to vigilante than meets the eye. Maybe there could be some way to reason with the man or figure out what compelled him to attack the Steel Sabers. Chio was having the same thoughts as Nizu. She remembered Rumi explaining how the vigilante treated her wounds back on Island. That man had to have some medical knowledge or expertise in the field. But that only left more questions about the vigilante's identity and past. And why did he go out of his way to save Rumi? Recovery Girl decided to revisit that subject when they had more information as she glanced behind at a window that showed a patient's room. Well, he certainly didn't go easy on Endeavor. Everyone looked at the window behind them and saw the prone form of Endeavor lying on a bed, his arm encased in a cast and his face covered in bandages. He was hooked up to a respirator as the EKG monitor next to him beeped at a steady pace. Everyone grimaced at the sordid state the flame hero was in. It'll take at least 3 months for him to heal. It would have taken 6 months if I hadn't used my quirk. Recovery Girl sighed, pitying Endeavor. You just know he's going to go on a riot when he wakes up. Mara commented. Sayaka mentally noted herself to have some agents stationed near Enji's room to monitor him if he ever did. She had a few choice words for Endeavor regarding his recklessness in setting half the port of Tokyo on fire, as well as ignoring orders from a JSDF superior. What about the others? Nizu inquired hopefully. With proper medical treatment, along with my quirk, they'll be back on duty in at least 5 days. Chio happily assured them. On another note, Fatgum, Mr. Brave, Gang Orca, Selkie, and Crust have fully recovered and will be released later tonight. Yagi, Nizu, Mara, and Sayaka felt a rush of relief at the news. At least Mizudafu wouldn't suffer a hero shortage for long. Say, do you know where Izuku is? Yagi asked, worried about his pupil. His mother's currently vicing him, so I think it's best that you give the boy some time to himself before meeting him. Nizu answered. Yagi understood and nodded. He wasn't going to get in the way of Izuku's reunion with his mother. Aizawa, Hawks, and Miruko are currently resting. I'm not allowing visitors for them at the moment. Recovery Girl sternly added. Her expression turned grim. Recently, we've had an incident with one of our patients, Tomoko. You mean Ragdoll? What happened? Yagi inquired. We're still trying to figure that out. Nizu answered as he motioned Sayaka to put him down. She attacked Maruko with a scalpel. Yagi, Mara, and Sayaka were left speechless. That certainly didn't sound like her at all. There was no way she would just attack somebody like that. When she tried to use her quirk to locate the vigilante, she suffered a complete psychotic break. We stopped her before she could seriously injure Rumi and found these drawings etched into a wall. Recovery Girl revealed as Nizu handed the trio his phone. Looking at the photos, they lightly gasped when they saw the familiar symbol of the vigilante along with a drawing and repeating message scrawled upon a white wall. My God, she drew this? Sayaka's eyes never left the photo. Yes, but what's confusing is that Hawks told us she never set foot on Island, so there was no way she could have known about the symbol. Nizu explained further. I believe her sudden mental breakdown may have been the doing of the vigilante, but we won't know for sure until we're able to know more about him. An air of silence hung over the group's heads as Sayaka handed the phone back to Nizu. Disturbing as the situation with Tomoko was, it only increased their misgivings with the vigilante. Was it a quirk that affected Tomoko? Or maybe the suit had some form of defense against quirks like hers. But none of that explained the symbol or the disturbing messages she scrawled. Yagi had several theories, but until he had a solid lead, they would remain theories. I'm having Tomoko placed under heavy sedation until I can get a licensed therapist to alleviate her condition. Recovery Girl said with her head hung low. I sent the photos over to Sir Nitai a while ago. If there's anyone that can discover some hidden meaning behind it, it's him. Nizu informed with confidence. Sayaka nodded. We're recovering more evidence from Island by the minute thanks to our forensics teams. We're still sifting through the ashes, but at least we're uncovering some clues. Tomorrow the HPSC will be holding a press conference. We'll tell them everything we know. Of course, we'll be using a cover story regarding All Might's fight against the vigilante for obvious reasons. Mara straightened himself. The public ain't gonna like what we have to tell him, but we don't have any other options available. The group looked to Yagi to hear his goal, but nothing came from him. The disheveled symbol of peace stared down at his feet with a grim frown for a few seconds before lifting his head to regard Recovery Girl. Do you know if David is here? I need to talk to him. Sayaka and Mara tensed up as they glanced toward Chio. Nizu looked perplexed. Recovery Girl could only sigh as she shut her eyes. He's 1 floor above us and awake, but I will say this. You better screw his head back on. And I mean tightly. 9th floor. David's shield had the eyes of a dead man. He stared vacantly at the wall on the opposite end of the room, his posture hunched over as he sat in his bed. He was listless and numb to the stinging pain on the side of his head, where one of the villains smashed the butt of his rifle against it. He was so disassociated from virtually anything around him that one would mistake him for being completely catatonic. The horrible events on Island kept replaying in his head, as well as what happened in the main server room. Samuel, his best friend since the first grade, betrayed him for the League and money. A man who was practically his brother turned against him, sabotaged his original plan, and put hundreds of innocent people at risk. But David knew full well that he was the one to blame for what happened. He hired actors who were villains the whole time, gave them and the Steel Sabers the keys to Island, and endangered his daughter and many other civilians on the island. All for a desperate, foolish plan to restore All Might's strength. It was an insane gambit, but he was so desperate to preserve the legacy of the symbol of peace so badly. He also did not want to see his longtime friend die, and the mere thought of it was soul-crushing. But it was evident to him that he had only worsened his friend's condition after seeing him stay within his powered-up state for so long back at the ballroom. And the League of Villains now had the quirk amplification headset. He glanced down at his shaking hands as he heard the mocking laughter of All for One in his mind. David had played right into that monster's hands, and he gave him what he wanted. And Melissa, the look of hurt and scorn on her face when Curator revealed what he had done. David had lost her. In a fit of denial and zealotry to restore Yagi's health, he had destroyed every shred of familial love between him and his daughter. He felt the sting of tears welling up in his eyes as he balled his hands up. If his wife was still alive, she'd never forgive him. The door to his room opened and David looked up to see Yagi, Sayaka, and Mara standing in the doorway. Yagi was deeply saddened at the state his friend was in while Sayaka and Mara had neutral expressions. David avoided their gazes as Yagi pulled up a chair and sat down next to his bed. Neither of them faced each other as they could not think of anything to say. Both of them felt terrible for what had happened to each other, and it showed. David grasped his bedsheets while Yagi silently drummed his fingers on his force-stand. The HPSC officials said nothing. "My daughter, is she okay?" David finally spoke. "She's been transferred to a separate hospital, and she's doing just fine from what we heard." Sayaka briefed. David nodded with a minuscule smile, while Yagi did the same. It brought them some relief to know that Melissa was okay. The room grew quiet again, with no one saying anything else. Yagi decided to break the ice with a sigh. "David, I know what you were trying to do." Shield said nothing. His head hung low. "But what I don't know is what you were thinking. Did you know that you were risking the lives of every man, woman, and child on Island, including Melissa?" Yagi harshly spoke to David. I just wanted to help you." David feebly answered. "You already know there is no way to fix my condition, David. No matter how hard anyone tries." Yagi stated. "Japan. No, the world needs you. They need their symbol of peace." David gripped his bedsheets tighter. Yagi shook his head. "I already told you. There is going to be a time when someone will have to take my place once I've exhausted all of my power. You need to put your faith in the next generation of heroes, David." "I just couldn't face reality," David confessed. "I've seen you win so many times I couldn't entertain the thought of a world without you, and I was so desperate to preserve your legacy that I—" David trailed off before breaking down in tears, covering his face as he sobbed. "And now the League has the headset. Oh God, they have it, Yagi. It's been destroyed," Tashinori revealed. David looked up from his hands at Yagi in surprise. "We recovered pieces of the headset on the Central Tower's roof thanks to our recovery teams. Therefore, it's safe to say that the LOV won't be using it anytime soon." Mara informed as his expression turned serious. "Our agents are going to destroy the remains, and before you get any ideas, you are not making another one." Sayaka's mouth formed a thin line as she approached the bed and stood next to Yagi. "Mr. Shield, did you know of the dangerous effects the quirk amplification headset had on its wearers? Pro heroes Hawks and Maruko have told us that the effects were similar to the drug trigger. Are you aware that trigger is one of the most dangerous substances on the planet and has since been considered by the Geneva Convention to be a potential WMD?" David gritted his teeth together in a mixture of shame and guilt. Why, yes, but the plan. His face scrunched up as he tried to fight back his tears over his role in the Island siege. The plan was to recover the prototype and use it as a basis for Sam and me to create an improved, finished version of the headset, so the side effects won't be as damaging to the user. I could have worked on it more if you hadn't shut down the project. Sayaka could hear the bitterness in David's voice at that accusation, but she showed no reaction. David continued, "Please let me talk to Samuel. I know he joined the league, but if I can just talk to him, I can convince him to help us. I believe in second chances and Samuel deserves that dash." "David, Sam's dead." Yagi broke the news sorrowfully. What?" David gasped. "We've recovered security camera footage of the main vault. The league killed Sam once he got them the headset," Mara explained, though without a hint of sympathy. David stared slack-jawed at Mara. His face morphed into anguish and uttered choked-up sobs as tears spilled from his eyes. Yagi gently placed a hand on his friend's back and patted him. He was also friends with Samuel and was just as hurt as David. Sayaka tried to appear sympathetic as best she could. Mara didn't have an ounce of pity for David. Sam may have altered the whole operation by siding with the League and the Sabres, but it was David who planned the whole thing out from the beginning. If David Shield never went through with this ridiculous plan, then Island wouldn't have been taken hostage. The vigilante never would have come and turned it into a slaughterhouse. 48 heroes wouldn't have been hospitalized. All Might wouldn't have one for all severely drained. None of this would be happening. Mara felt his phone vibrate and took it out to check what it was. He sighed and exited the room. David wiped the tears off his face and looked at Yagi. "How much time do you have left now?" Toshinori lowered his head. 1 hour a day. Shield buried his face into his hands and shuddered. This was all his fault. There was no way around it and no way to downplay it. This was all on him. I take full responsibility. This was my doing, and I'll accept any punishment or prison sentence I receive. Yagi was admittedly unwilling to see his friend behind bars, but he was right. He aided and abetted dangerous criminals despite previously thinking they were actors and endangered innocent people. However, David was at least willing to face justice and accept the consequences. Hopefully, the courts would be merciful about his sentence. "We're not arresting you." Sayaka broke the silence, causing the two men to look up at her in confusion. "David, you are the most skilled expert in quirk research and support items. Your contributions to both fields have been revolutionary and have benefited people the world over. We can't have someone as important as you be locked up for the rest of your life. Therefore, the HPSC is covering up your involvement in the Island siege and placing the blame squarely on Samuel Abraham. But you will be under our protection and heavily monitored from now on, and before you voice any objection, it's non-negotiable." David was heavily conflicted about this. While it was true that Sam deliberately joined the LOV, it felt wrong to exclude himself from the conflict when he had a role in it too. Yagi did not like this one bit. It wouldn't be the first time the HPSC twisted the truth a little to prevent a mass panic or at least prevent things from going AFO's way. But he had known Sayaka for years, so he knew that her decision did not come lightly. Grant probably wished she didn't have to resort to this, but was a necessary measure. So maybe there was some merit to her thinking. David slumped back into his bed in resignation as he stared up at the ceiling. "Melissa hates me now, doesn't she?" "No," Yagi quickly answered with a resolute tone. "David, she would never hate you. She's emotionally hurt, but I'm sure that if she's given enough time, she'll come around and dash." "Don't." David entrapped him as he looked away from Yagi to hide his tears. "Just don't." The symbol of peace visibly withered as he guessed that his friend was fully convinced that his daughter would never forgive him. He wanted to say something else, but David wanted to be left alone, so Yagi glumly got up and went towards the door. Sayaka followed him out of the room, but not before stopping in the doorway. "David." Sayaka started while glancing over her shoulder at him. "There was a reason we halted your research on the headset." And with that, Sayaka left the room and closed the door. David lay motionlessly on his bed, cursing himself for everything that had happened on Island. His daughter would never look at him or talk to him the same way ever again. He made sure of that when he went through with his plan. "Melissa," David sobbed. "Forgive me." Outside David's hospital room, Yagi and Mara sat themselves down on the waiting room chairs. Nizu and Chio stood nearby with Mara, who had just got done with his phone call. Nizu walked up next to Yagi with a sad look. "Mara has told us what David did. Not only is All for One planning the downfall of society, but also seeks to tear us apart from our friends as well." Yagi deeply scowled as he tightened his grip on the force stand. AFO was going to pay for this. Mara cleared his throat, getting everyone's attention. Not to mention that he's gathering more followers. We can confirm through security camera evidence that the Volcano Thieves and Isena Ushimitsudoki are with the League of Villains. The group tensed up upon hearing that. Volcano and Isana were very powerful quirk users and devious villains to boot. And now they had teamed up with the LOV, making the organization incredibly dangerous. It's also not the end of our problems for the moment. Neos Mesa recently called to inform me of 3 events that just recently happened several hours ago, all of which is pretty bad for us. Mara tersely said, "The first problem is that our vigilante struck again." "What?" Yagi shot out of his seat as the others regarded Mara with shock. "The maniac slaughtered a street gang looting a store. 2 heroes tried to stop him, but he knocked their lights out before they could arrest him. They're okay, but our vigilante is still at large," Mara explained. Secondly, the severed arm of Tamura Shigaraki was stolen from the Mizuta-fu police precinct's evidence room. The security cameras showed a villain entering the room through some kind of black portal. The same portal seen during the USJ villain invasion. Hirojiri. Niza deduced. "Bingo." Mara smiled humorlessly. "Bastard just strode in and took the arm like he was grocery shopping. At least the cameras showed what he looks like. Smoggy body, yellow eyes, and a damn fancy suit. If this guy can walk in and out of a police station that easily, including UA, then we're in bigger trouble than we thought." But what could AFO be thinking by retrieving Tamura's arm? Recovery Girl pondered, tapping her cane. "I don't doubt that he might try to reattach his arm, but even if he did, the damage to the nerve endings would severely hamper Tamura's quirk. That monster will find a way. He always seems to do." Sayaka dreaded. "What's our last problem?" Mara's face shifted from his usual tired visage to one of absolute contempt and scorn. Seafor was in town. The others did not gasp or widen their eyes. Instead, they all deeply scowled at the mention of that name. C4 had become a name synonymous with betrayal and depravity. His actions nearly set hero/public relations back by decades, and to this day, was still regarded with bitter hatred and anger amongst the hero community. Nizu was always not one to harbor resentment towards anybody, having always believed in second chances, but Rokuro Nomura was a different matter altogether. If he knew what the man would do after becoming a hero, Nizu would have expelled him from UA the second he enrolled. He killed 2 police officers and a high schooler. The sick fuck carved his initials into her forehead. Mara growled, further fueling everyone's anger. If here's here, then it means All for One is bolstering up his forces after his failed operation on I Island. This was not good news. Everyone still had no clue how many villains AFO had under his employ, and there was no way of knowing what the mastermind had in store for Japan in the future. The group was quiet, unsure of which course of action to take. They were all still very rattled and barely grasping the aftermath of the I Island siege. "I can see most of you are trying to guess what happens next," Nizu observed as he trotted away from them with his back turned and hands clasped behind his back. "I've always preferred to think about what happens in the present rather than in the future. No one can ever predict the future. It is like water and never set in stone. Instead of trying to guess what AFO might be planning next, we should focus on what's more important now. Mitigating the fallout of I Island. Let's work on getting things under control, then we can coordinate our efforts on finding out the next move of the League of Villains." The others took Nizu's words to heart. He wasn't the principal of the most prestigious hero school in Japan for nothing. But what about the vigilante? He's still out there. Yagi brought up the other issue. And he already knows about my secret. What's stopping him from exposing that to the public? Nizu thoughtfully rubbed his chin as he paced around. That man is a conundrum, I'll say. Excessively violent and brutal against his enemies, but shows a degree of mercy and restraint to those he does not deem a threat. He also doesn't seem like the type to leak that kind of information. We'll focus on him at another time, but I believe there may be more to this vigilante than meets the eye. But until that time comes, we must remain vigilant, as all heroes do. Yagi smiled at Nizu's hopeful words, as did the others. He got up from his seat and went near a window as the others began talking about the press conference tomorrow. Tashinori gazed at the lights of Mizuta-fu in the distance as he heard the intermittent sounds of police sirens. Deep in thought, Yagi ruminated on Nizu's strategy. It was one he agreed with, and he saw no flaw in it. But he could not get his mind off the vigilante. Maybe there was something more to him behind the helmet, but that still did not exempt him from what happened on the island. But as Nizu explained, they should focus on present matters. Yagi exhaled as his eyes turned serious. He was not going to let All for One get the last laugh on the Shield family. And he was also going to ensure the same did not happen to Midoriya. Beneath Mizutofu the Slayer's hideout, sparks harmlessly flew up into the Slayer's visor as he applied the newly made welding torch to the large machine he had been building. A while ago, the Slayer arrived back at his hideout and went to work burying the bodies of the steel sabers he had killed to cover up the stench. Some of the tunnels had soft patches of dirt along the tracks due to centuries of disuse, so it made it easy for the doomslayer to dig out some holes by hand and dump the bodies in there. As much as he hated giving them a burial, it was necessary to ensure that no one came down where wondering what smelled like death. The station had an emergency fire hose located in a cabinet and provided the doomslayer with a means to wash away the blood staining the station. Once that was done, Vega instructed the Slayer to begin construction on 2 large-scale devices that the AI had yet to elaborate on. The support items that Taggart had taken from Island supplied him with various tools needed to create said devices. The other items aided him in the creation of the machines, and the last 8 hours were spent toiling away at the inventions in silence. Vega walked him through the process as well as gave him some helpful pointers while working. His speech pattern was, after all, modeled after a college professor. The Doomslayer fused another component while attaching several more wires to it, until he slowly stopped. He glanced behind him at a subway tunnel at the other end of the station. He felt like he was being watched, but he could tell there was no one there at all. After a second or two, he resumed his tinkering. It was probably just a sewer rat. But little did the Slayer know that he was being watched. At the other end of the tunnel around the corner stood Azrael, the Archangel of Death. Azrael stood several feet tall, adorned in graceful blue and gold robes with a decorative arch behind him. His beautiful wings had blue runes on the longest feathers and were neatly folded behind his back. He had flowing white hair, eyes that lacked pupils or corneas, and golden markings adorned the side of his face. Azrael cautiously peered around the corner of the tunnel to stare at the bane of hell once more. He eventually pulled back and floated down the tunnel in the opposite direction. His hands folded, Azrael donned a conflicted frown born out of worry and apprehension. A being that the Ascendant Realm had thought was a myth concocted by the demons was real. The Creator, his Son, and the gods from the other pantheons were still debating on what to do with the Slayer. Perhaps the Helix Stone did foretell his arrival. But what purpose could he have here? The End War was over. Hell posed no threat to the mortal realm whatsoever, and the Dark Lord was slain by the Creator and the Prime Council. So why was the Doomslayer here? Regrettably, no one in the Ascendant Realm had a clear answer, and all they could do was observe the Doomslayer until a decision was made. His siblings were currently conducting investigations on the possible origins of the Slayer. Usual was consulting with numerous seers across the pantheons for any potential leads, while Uriel had plans to reread the Helix Stone with Ulthane and the Crowfather. In the meantime, his brothers were on high alert if the Unchained Predator posed a threat to the Ascendant Realm. Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael would stand vigil and be ready to fight the Slayer if necessary. But the Creator assured them that he sensed no threat from the Doomslayer, as he did save dozens of lives back on Island with his son sharing the same sentiment. Regardless, that did little to assuage everyone's concerns about the Slayer. Azrael himself arrived on Earth earlier to conduct his observations on the Slayer. It was sheer luck that he managed to render himself intangible at the last second before the demon killer spotted him. Azrael did not want to risk being seen by the one thing demons feared, so he decided to return to the Ascendant Realm. Floating upwards, he phased through the ceiling and continued ascending until he appeared in an intersection of a neighborhood, completely invisible to anyone walking by. As he spread his wings and flew upwards into the night sky, Azrael dreaded to think what All for One might be planning with the Doomslayer. To be continued. Chapter 28. Grace of the Angels. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Jake Blues Brothers. Mizutofu General Hospital. 3rd floor. Fatgum, Mr. Brave, Crust, Selkie, and Gang Orca were recently given the all-clear to leave the hospital. The group was more than ready to get back to work after hearing that the Island siege was over. Aside from hearing about a massive explosion from the nurses when they regained consciousness, they knew nothing about what transpired on the island. As they prepared to leave, Iwabami, Kesajiri Man, Wash, Air Jet, and Slide and Go came into their hospital room to see how they were doing. They brought them up to speed. The Steel Sabers had been utterly annihilated, and the Vigilante defeated up to 48 pro heroes. To say that they were shocked would be an understatement. All of them, Facum nearly shouted. He beat all of them. Yes, if you can believe it. Iwabami answered as she stared down at her feet. The recovering heroes were speechless. Knowing how one man defeated dozens of pro heroes on his own was staggering. And that's not the scariest part. We got word a while ago that he knocked out 2 other heroes right after he slaughtered a whole street gang. He's still out there. Airjet fearfully revealed. But hold on a minute. Crust suddenly interjected. You said earlier that you saw All Might leave the airport to go fight the Vigilante. If that madman was spotted in Mizuta-fu, does this mean that All Might lost against him? We don't know for sure. Kesajiri Man shook his head. The HPSC's still trying to piece together what happened, and we've heard nothing from them yet. They're going to hold a press conference tomorrow. The other heroes glanced at each other with fear. Was there somebody out there who was stronger than All Might? Did All Might lose? All Might didn't lose. Gang Orca broke the silence, straightening his tie. I refuse to believe it. There's no way someone like him could have lost. That did little to ease everyone's fears over the situation. As much as they wanted to point out the glaring evidence, such as the Vigilante having escaped and All Might being nowhere to be seen, no one wanted to argue with Gang Orca. The whale hero was known to be as stubborn as a mule and could get pretty scary if anyone disagreed with him. Hey, let's not talk about that right now. Wash nervously interjected. We could really use some extra hands in Mizuta-fu. It's bedlam out there. How bad is it? Mr. Brave tilted his head. It's getting more out of control by the minute. Airjet placed his helmet back on. At first, we had everything on lockdown, but now word is starting to spread that dozens of pro heroes are out of action and the criminals are taking advantage of it. We've got multiple small-time villain gangs pilfering stores on every street corner or waging turf wars with other gangs. The other heroes, sidekicks, and officers have them locked down, but some of us are having trouble with the stronger villain groups, and we're already shorthanded as it is. Well then, it's a good thing we're raring to go. Selkie determinedly placed his goggles over his eyes. That's the spirit. No time to waste. The public needs our aid, and we're here to answer the call. Slide and Go posed with heroic fervor. Let us cry havoc and let slip the dogs of justice. The hero was out the door in a flash, skating down the hall with the grace of an ice skater. Everyone else sweat dropped. Boy, I thought I loved hamming it up. Crust admitted. Never hurts to have one more. Iwabami playfully teased as she and the other heroes left the room. Everyone took the emergency exit to avoid the mass of reporters crowding the front entrance and ventured into the night to bring order to Mizuta-fu. Slide and Go, on the other hand, slid into a hidden alleyway and dug out his phone from his pocket. He contacted one of the lieutenants of the Meta Liberation Army, who went by the codename Trumpet, via texting to update him on the current situation. Numerous MLA agents across Mizuta-fu kept their eyes peeled for any news or important events following the I-Island siege that they could relay to their superiors. SG, multiple pros are out of action. Criminals are causing havoc throughout the city, and the HPSC is having a press conference tomorrow. T. Will relay information to Redestro. Resume your patrols and update us whenever possible. SG Roger. Slide and Go did the traditional MLA salute before putting his phone away. He then ran out of the alley and skated down the road to resume his hero duties. Uriel stood on the edge of a building, eyeing the double agent with condemning eyes. The Archangel shook her head in disappointment. Tatsuyuki Tokaname had been granted a versatile blessing that could have helped countless people, but he squandered it on pretending to be a hero by casting in his lot with the Meta Liberation Army. She bore a contemptible frown at the thought of the MLA. While the group claimed that they fought for the right for citizens to use their quirks freely and that their powers shouldn't be regulated, they were nothing more than an army of spiteful terrorists who wished to cause as much chaos as they could and harm anyone who opposed their ideals. Disheartening, isn't it? A seemingly peaceful ideology used for violence and anarchy. A voice came from behind her as if they just read her mind. Uriel looked over her shoulder at the new arrival. It was her brother Jeremiel, the Archangel of Dreams. He was dressed in the same ornate armor his sister wore, only lighter in color and his wings were relatively lithe compared to Uriel's armored wings. His eyes were a crystalline blue, while his hair was curly and shimmering gold. "It is," Uriel sadly answered. "I am Yatsubashi never wanted this." The mother of quirks, who first coined the term, fought for the free use of said abilities but were purely non-violent and pacifistic. It was only when she was murdered by an anti-quirk hate group, the Creature Rejection Clan, her son Chikara Yatsubashi formed the MLA and took a decidedly more radical approach to her mother's ideals. After Chikara took his own life during his incarceration, his son Rakia took over the organization and turned it into the terrorist organization it is today. As much as they wanted to lament the current state of affairs of the MLA, they had other important matters to attend to. "Will you be able to heal Tomoko's mind?" Uriel inquired. "Absolutely. The Lord has tasked me to rid the visions plaguing her mind," Jeremiel affirmed. "She will suffer no longer." Uriel sighed in relief and contentment, grateful for the ascendant realms, one miracle per mortal policy. The gods, mostly through the Creator or his Son, would bestow upon a mortal a miracle to save them from certain death or grant them an epiphany when they were at their lowest point. Knowing that the young hero would recover from her mental trauma warmed her heart. But as surprising as this may sound, some of the gods requested that we hold that off until they view her visions. Jeremiel revealed. They believe that there may be clues to the doomslayer's origins within them. What did the Creator have to say about that? Uriel asked. While he agreed with their reasoning, he does not want to prolong Tomoko's pain. Jeremiel explained. The Creator wishes to learn more about the Slayer as well, but not at the expense of one mortal's suffering. Most of the Prime Council was in agreement and sent me here to the mortal realm to rid Tomoko's visions. With any luck, she'll heal. Uriel replied. I should be on my way to the Crowfather and Ulthane. We need to have another look at the Helix Stone to see if there was anything else we might have missed the first time we read it. What of our brother Usual? Jeremiel asked. He's traversing the pantheons to question their seers about the Slayer. They might know something about his arrival. Uriel surmised. In that case, I apologize for being the bearer of ill news. They heard the voice of Usual on the other side of the building's rooftop. The two angels glanced to their right to see the Archangel of Valor walk towards them. Impeccable timing as usual. I have sought counsel with Tiresias, the Norns, and many others have revealed the same answers. The Doomslayer's story is completely unwritten. Uriel and Jeremiel's eyes widened in shock as their mouths hung open. A being unbound by fate. Uriel whispered. Not only that, his very presence seems to alter the fates of those around him. Usual revealed in a grave tone. We are dealing with something that has never occurred in this universe since the End War. An uncomfortable silence followed as the implication of the possible dangers the Hellwalker posed. Since when was a demigod capable of something as improbable as defying fate itself? And for other mortals for that matter? This revelation is troubling, but we must not lose focus. I will go to Tomoko while you two continue with your investigation of the Doomslayer. I wish you the best of luck, brother and sister. Jeremiel said as he flapped his wings and took off in the direction of the hospital. And you, brother. Uriel nodded her head kindly. They were about to head to their destination, but Uriel turned her head over to the rest of the city to her left. Sensing the presence of someone familiar, her expression turned deeply crestfallen. Usual sensed her sister's malaise as she flew off in the opposite direction, following after her as she did. Uptown, Mizuta Fualdaren Park. Despite the chaos around town, the park was deserted since there was nothing of value to loot from, which made it perfect for its sole occupant to contact the League of Villains. The mole planted at UA scanned the area to see if the coast was clear before sitting themselves down on a park bench and taking out their cell phone. After a brief moment of trepidation, they dialed the number and made the call. Do you have anything to report? Nizu just announced that he's closing UA until the staff returns from the hospital. Also, the training camp trip has been cancelled. Is that so? Never expected the rodent to make such a rash decision. Regardless, this is merely a bump in the road. Update me on when UA opens its doors again. Is there any other news of importance I should know about? No, there isn't. Are you certain? You wouldn't happen to be keeping something from me, are you? And no, I dashed. I don't want to remind you of what will happen if you don't cooperate. No, I do have some news. Izuku said that he met the vigilante a couple of days ago. The man fell out of the sky near his apartment. Izuku Midoriya? Oh, how the stars align. You wouldn't happen to know his address, would you? I don't. Do you need me to find out? Not at the moment. That's further down the line of my plans. Inform me of any new developments in the meantime. I understand. Excellent. This is why you're my favorite little infiltrator. And with that, the call ended. The mole stared down at their phone as teardrops fell onto the screen. They dreamed of becoming a hero. That's all they wanted. How did it come to this? The infiltrator got up from their seat and left the park, resigned to their fate and the end of their dreams. All of this did not go unnoticed as Uriel and Usual stood nearby, completely invisible to the naked eye, having watched the entire conversation. The archangels wore heartbroken expressions. Of all the poor, innocent souls that AFO had forcibly indentured into his cruel whims, why did it have to be that poor child? Uriel wanted to desperately break the metaphorical chains AFO had wrapped around them and guide them back into the light. But alas, she could not due to her oath to never directly interfere with the affairs of mortals. That is, unless she was granted permission to do so by the Ascendant Realm. The eternal balance had to be kept after all, but a miracle was not happening fast enough for that lost soul, and she couldn't watch them suffer for another minute longer. Uriel felt a hand gently placed itself on her shoulder, and she glanced up at Usual. Her brother had the same saddened look as her, desperately wanting to take action as well. The two stared at the mole for a few more seconds before they flew up into the midnight skies and headed for Ireland. As they soared through the clouds, Uriel bitterly wished that the Creator would ignore one of his rules just once and smite all for one off the face of creation. Unknown location. All for one's hideout. The symbol of despair smiled wickedly as he put away his phone. Hooked up to a specialized chair that monitored his health, AFO swiveled himself around to face the kneeling forms of Curator and the volcano thieves. The lair of AFO was nightmarishly foreboding. A circular, wide-open room that made the occupants feel small with rows upon rows of cylindrical preservation tanks lining the walls. Hundreds of cables snaked across the ground from the tanks and attached themselves to AFO's chair or various experimental equipment. The tanks were filled with a purple liquid that cast an eerie glow throughout the room, and within them were gestating embryos or half-formed gnomes. All in all, it was cozy if you were Dr. Herbert West. Now, before we begin, you can pick yourselves up. There's honestly no need for that. All for one politely requested. But Master, we failed you dash, Curator responded just as AFO raised his hand. Wolfram is to blame for this fiasco. He let his overconfidence get the best of him, so the fault lies solely with him. Your inability to retrieve the headset and set off the bomb was the result of an unknown, unforeseen element that you could not have possibly accounted for. How were you supposed to know one man would drastically alter our plans? AFO reasoned. From what you have told me, you were successful in breaking David's shield, so this wasn't a failure in the slightest. You made the right call by falling back once you saw the heroes coming. Curator was taken aback by his master's forgiveness when he thought for sure he was going to be killed for his failure. You are too kind, Master. With that being said, it is a shame that we weren't able to obtain the quirk amplification headset. AFO expressed as he clasped his hands together. It would have been a boon for our organization. Well, I do have some good news on that part. Volcano spoke up. Oh. AFO tilted his head. Magumo pulled on the collar of his bodysuit and dug out a slip of blue-colored paper. He walked over to AFO and gave it to him. The criminal mastermind plucked it from Volcano's fingers and opened it up. It was blueprints for the QH. AFO's scarred face lit up like it was Christmas Day. Is this what I think it is? Yep. When I took care of Samuel and made my way back to Curator, I remembered there was a blueprint for the headset inside its case. So I nabbed it and hid it in my suit just in case something were to happen, you know? Volcano recounted. Oh dear, it's learned to think. Curator snidely insulted. Hey. Volcano grunted in hostility. Now, gentlemen. There'll be none of that in here. AFO chided, causing both men to back down. Volcano, you displayed quick thinking and initiative. I'm sure Dr. Garaki would be very pleased to work on this after he's done with Tamura's arm. Curator, give these blueprints to him. He should be in his lab. As you wish, Master. Curator bowed. In the meantime, Volcano, I want you to send a message to the core LOV members. They are to stand down until they receive further orders. Also, have Shigaraki sent here so that we may begin the reattachment process. AFO ordered. Since our role in the Island siege has no doubt been discovered, we need to lay low until UA reopens or until another opportunity presents itself to us. Until then, All for One rotated his chair around and tapped a button on his keyboard to bring up the video of the Steel Sabers hijacked broadcast just as the vigilante sawed one of them down the middle. I'm dying to find out more about our little diamond in the rough. Muzutafut General Hospital. Isolation Wing. If she wakes up and starts to panic, do your best to calm her down, but if she starts to become violent, you'll have to sedate her again. Chio told the group of orderlies before her. They nodded and left the room, leaving her with Tomoko. The heroine was restrained to a bed via leather straps tightly bound to her legs, arms, and torso. It pained Recovery Girl to see Tomoko like this. This girl saved dozens of lives throughout her career and was a beacon of endless optimism to everyone around her. She didn't deserve to be tied up like this. But it was for her own protection, no matter how degrading it was. Shaking her head sadly, Chio took the clipboard from the end of the bed and read the diagnosis sheet. She grimaced. It did not paint a pretty picture for Tomoko at all. Tomoko Shiritoko. Age, 31. Hero alias, Ragdoll. Quirk, search. Symptoms, post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorder, unspecified rage disorder, compulsive scrawling, acute morbid depression, aphasia, visual and auditory hallucinations, chronic hysteria, paranoid schizophrenia, frenzied confusion, intermittent explosive disorder, attention deficiency, persecutory and grandiose delusions. Treatment, intramuscular meds, heavy sedation, physical restraints. Warning to all staff. Absolutely no theological discussions. Recovery Girl sighed heavily as she put the clipboard back onto a nearby counter. She did not want to imagine the reactions of the other pussycats when they found out their friend had suffered a full-blown psychotic break. Tomoko's hero career was over if this girl didn't get psychological help soon. But what confused Recovery Girl the most was the part about theological discussions. Tomoko never struck her as the religious type, but when they were bringing the unconscious heroine into the isolation wing, she suddenly woke up and started screaming about biblical visions of doom. Angels, demons, devils among us, God smiting the wicked, Armageddon, and worlds on fire. It was honestly pretty scary to hear that kind of stuff coming from such a good-natured woman who loved to help people. Recovery Girl grimly went for the door, hanging her head. All she could do at this point was pray that Tomoko would recover from her insanity, for the sake of her friends who cared so much about her. Chio left the room and closed the door behind her, unaware that Jeremiel was standing right next to the door. Jeremiel quietly watched her walk right past him and down the hall like he wasn't even there. The beings of the Ascendant Realm all had the innate ability to render themselves invisible to mortals so that they could easily traverse throughout the mortal realm and avoid unwanted detection. Jeremiel phased himself through the door and went over to the restrained Tomoko. She was currently in a medically induced state of inactivity, but she had sweat pouring down her face and occasionally winced in discomfort. Jeremiel could see that she was in deep emotional pain due to her trauma and thanked the Creator that he was here to heal her from that pain. He held out his hand and small wisps of golden light started to swirl around Tomoko's head until they flew up to his hand and formed a basketball-sized orb. It was gold in color and warm to the touch as it emanated a shimmering glow that illuminated the room. Jeremiel reached down at the sheath attached to his belt and pulled out a curved dagger with blue runes imprinted along the blade. He tightly gripped the hilt, raised the dagger over his head, and plunged the blade into the orb. Cracks formed around the orb as it grew brighter, and it shattered into tiny pieces that froze in midair and dissipated instantly. Jeremiel put his weapon away, glancing back down at Tomoko, who had stopped sweating and now had a peaceful, serene expression. The Archangel of Dreams smiled at the young mortal lying before him, proud that he had brought her peace. She would no longer be driven to madness by her visions, and her life would gradually shift back to normal. But Jeremiel knew that this was also a double-edged sword. By destroying the visions, Tomoko would have no memories of what had happened to her and would wake up in a state of confusion. This meant she would not remember having a psychological breakdown or attacking Rumi Usajiyama. It would be a huge gap in her memories, but it was for the best. Jeremiel had accomplished his mission per the Creator's orders, and it warmed his heart to aid those in need. He gently patted Tomoko's hand and whispered in a kindly tone, "May you be blessed with good dreams from now on, child." Jeremiel let go of her hand and left the room by phasing through the wall again, leaving everyone in the staff unaware of what had transpired and granting Tomoko peace of mind. To be continued. Chapter 29. Never the same. When the world finds out what you can do, it's going to change everything. Our beliefs, our notions of what it means to be human, everything. Jonathan Kent, Man of Steel. Mizuta General Hospital the next day. It was early in the morning when Izuku received a visit from Melissa Shield. It was a welcome surprise since he never got the chance to talk to her after they were evacuated from my island. Melissa explained to Izuku that once she was discharged from the hospital, Sayaka Grant informed her that she would be under HPSC protection until it was deemed she would no longer be under threat by the League of Villains. "So you're really going to be okay with this?" Izuku questioned. Melissa sighed. "It's not like I have a choice, but maybe it's for the best." And she was right in that regard. The LOV wanted to use her talents for their sinister purposes, and she would rather die than help them. "So what happens next?" Izuku pressed. "Well, my grandparents heard what happened, so they're coming to Japan along with my uncle and aunt. They'll be taking care of me from now on, until things get sorted out with my dad." Her tone of voice darkened towards the end, which unsettled Izuku. "Is he going to prison?" he asked, dreading the answer. "No. The HPSC still needs him, so they pinned the entire debacle on Abraham, since he was the one who gave the Sabers the keys to Island and worked with the League of Villains. But he's dead now. The League killed him," Melissa revealed. Izuku was shocked to hear that. Not just at Samuel's death, but also that the HPSC would just pass on the blame like that so easily. "But if you ask me, they let him off too easily." She voiced her disapproval. It was painfully clear to Izuku that she still harbored feelings of resentment toward her father. It was one of the reasons why he wanted to talk to her about back on Island, but never got the chance. Despite what David did, Midoriya didn't want Miles's anger to fester into outright hatred of her father. "Melissa, I understand you're angry at him, but he made a mistake, Izuku began before getting cut off. "That could have got people killed." Melissa turned her head away, her eyes glassy with tears. "I don't want to talk about it." For a few seconds, Izuku didn't say anything. "But that didn't mean he going to let it go so easily. I kind of have issues with my father too." Melissa did not respond. Midoriya laid back in his bed, staring up at the ceiling. "I mean, it wasn't anything like David, but it's more among the line of abandonment. My father was married to his job. I was too young to understand it at the time. He claims that he meant well, and it was to support the family, but he kept staying longer hours at the office and barely had time for me and Mom. That led to the two of them having a lot of arguments, but they wanted to make it work for my sake. They tried so hard, but it wasn't meant to be, so they divorced around my 5th birthday. My dad said he would try to visit sometime around Christmas, but he didn't show up. After that, I never saw him again." Melissa had stopped looking away and was staring at Izuku with sympathy. "You have every right to be mad at David, but he feels terrible about what happened, and he never meant for you to get hurt. You don't have to forgive him today or right now, but please don't hold a grudge or say something you can't take back. You still have a father. I don't," he implored. Melissa appeared to be at a loss for words. While it was true that she was still furious at David for endangering everybody, could she truly hate him for the rest of her life? As she pondered her stance on her father, she thought back to all the good times they shared. Melissa ultimately decided that she could not let one bad experience mark the end of her relationship with her dad. She would forgive him, but not just yet. "I need to think about it," she sighed. "I need more time." Izuku smiled a little in response. "At least it was progress. I'm sorry I wasn't able to keep your full gauntlet from getting destroyed. It helped me out a lot. Don't worry yourself over it." Melissa waved him down. "That was only a prototype. I can easily create another one. Only this time it'll be more fleshed out. I still want to keep making support items, even though Island isn't going to be unusable for a while. That's why I'm enrolling at UA." "Oh, really?" Izuku said, surpursed. "But aren't you quirkless?" "Yeah, but I'm going to be joining the support department as part of an exchange program. I met Nizu and Power Loader a long time ago, and they were impressed with some of the inventions I made. They suggested to my father that I utilize my talents in the creation of support items, so that's basically where I'm going to go from there once UA reopens. Melissa explained. That sounds great. I know you'll help so many people. Izuku excitedly beamed. That's what I always wanted to do. Melissa replied confidently. She heard her cell phone vibrate in her pocketbook and took it out to check who it was. She studied the text she had just received. Well, I have to get going. My relatives just arrived at the airport. Get well soon, Izuku. Midoriya nodded his head. I will. See you at UA. Melissa smiled and nodded as well before getting up from the chair next to Izuku's bed and leaving out the door. Midoriya, now left to himself, turned his head over to the window on his right and gazed at the rays of the early morning sun shining through his blinds. It was a relaxing sight, considering everything that had happened. He did not sleep well last night since his dreams consisted of blood, gore, and the vigilante. He would never forget the man's cold, soulless glare as the flames roared around the monster in human form. Izuku wondered if he would ever have a decent night's sleep after what he went through, or if any of his friends for that matter. But Kugu easily had the worst of it, and there was no way of knowing what his attitude was going to be like when they returned to UA High School. Izuku felt a headache coming on from his overthinking and slowly drifted off to sleep. The warmth of his blanket and the pillow behind his head lulled him into a sense of relaxation as his eyelids grew heavy. I am here. Gah! Izuku nearly jumped out of his bed when the all-too-familiar catchphrase of All Might loudly announced itself. He whipped his head over to the left and saw Toshinri Yagi in a hospital gown standing in the doorway. To check up on you. Yagi finished with a raise of his hand, followed by a cough. Though Izuku looked happy to see his mentor again, he was a little bit irritated that he was denied a much-needed nap. You were admitted here too? Izuku guessed as Yagi sat in the chair. Yup. What are the odds? Yagi chuckled, having gained some of his humor back. I'll be out of here tomorrow, still need to rest up. Same with me, Izuku said. After that, the two of them stayed silent for 2 uncomfortable minutes. They did not know what else to say next. Both of them were still deeply shaken from their horrifying ordeal. Yagi then uttered an exhausted sigh and hung his head. I am so sorry. Yagi apologized. I had no idea something like this would happen. It was supposed to be a friendly visit, No, it's not your fault. Izuku stopped him. It's mine. I should have reported that man when he fell outside my apartment. Had I known what he was capable of, I would have called the police. But you didn't know? How could any of us have known? Yagi reasoned, placing a hand on his student's shoulder. It did little to ease the boy as he fidgeted nervously, remembering a subject that Hagakure brought up last night. Is that kind of bloodshed and violence going to be common when I become a hero? Yagi struggled to find something to say to him, but all he could do was look away from him. How could he possibly try to answer that question after what the poor lad had to go through? It ain't all sunshine and rainbows, kid. Came the voice of a woman. The duo looked to their left to see Maruko standing in the open door. Granted, it's not an utter bloodbath like on Island, but there's always the risk of getting put in the ground 6 feet under. However, I'd say all of us lucked out on that day. We should have been dead 1,000 times over, but I guess fate had different plans for us. She continued, closing the door and sitting herself down at the foot of Izuku's hospital bed. I was feeling restless, so I went to go stretch my legs. I checked up on the other heroes to see how they were doing and came here afterward. She said, folding her arms so that Izuku and Yagi could get a good look at her scars. They shuddered, as to be expected. Well, Rumi is correct on the earlier subject. Being a hero can be very dangerous at times, no different than being a police officer or a firefighter. Yagi said in a somewhat resigned tone. The faculty at UA have to prepare you for that when you enter your 4th semester. I already know about that, it's just that I didn't expect to see so much blood. Izuku gulped, turning his gaze down to his lap. Yagi's chin quivered at the sight of Midoriya, so traumatized. Maruko's expression was stern, though she too felt sorry for what the kid had to go through. Toshinori sighed through his nose and straightened himself. Izuku, you've proved yourself to not only be the next bearer of One for All, but also a capable hero. I chose you to be my inheritor, and I have no doubts that you will live up to the mantle of symbol of peace. But if you feel like you can't do this, I won't hold anything against you if you choose to stop. No, Izuku suddenly exclaimed, startling the heroes. I can't back out of this. I have worked so hard to get where I am now, and nothing is going to change my mind. It's been my dream to be a hero, and I'm not backing down. All Might, you know I chose this path. If not me, then who else? I'm still enrolling at UA, and I will never quit being a hero. At first, Yagi still appeared momentarily surprised by Izuku's earlier outburst, but he gradually became proud of his student voice his conviction of staying a hero. Even after the horrific events on Island, Izuku remained true to his dream and would never give up on it. It was a relief to know that he made the right decision in bestowing Izuku with OFA. That's good to hear, young Midoriya. Maruko grinned. I'll say it again, you got moxie. But get yourself some rest, or you're going to get an earful from Recovery Girl. Let us heroes pick up the slack until you're ready. But aren't a lot of heroes out of action right now? Izuku recalled. Well, most of them are awake, and Hawks along with Eraserhead just got released. But when I saw the other recovering heroes, you could see the fear in their eyes. I mean, I don't think any of them are going to forget this. Maruko recounted, the hair on her ears standing up when she remembered her frightening encounter with Ragdoll. Granted, none of them were reduced to babbling lunatics, but the raw terror in their eyes was noticeable. Whatever the vigilante did to them, it was going to scar them for life. Izuku and Yagi felt the same. They, along with Rumi, had only seen the aftermath of the hero's battle against the vigilante. They could only imagine what it was like to witness that one-sided fight, where one man single-handedly defeated multiple top-ranked pro heroes on his own. It filled them with uncertainty and dread. But he did go out of his way not to kill them. Maruko tapped her chin. Like we all discussed before, he's violent as hell but goes out of his way to rescue people. It's still not going to change what he did, though, no matter how good his intentions were. Yagi voiced his disapproval of the vigilante's actions. But then how do we stop him? Izuku asked, hoping for an answer. If All Might couldn't beat him, then who? What? You want to go at him? Maruko joked. Izuku's jaw fell open as he stared at Rumi with mortification. The thought of him trying to fight the vigilante almost made him lose control of his bowels. Relax, I'm yanking your chain. Maruko waved him down. But then she donned a stern glare at Izuku. Seriously though, don't be that stupid. I assure you, he won't do that kind of stunt. I trained him well, after all. Toshinori quickly vouched for Izuku. The boy nodded in confirmation. He would never in a million years ever try to take on that madman. If you say so. Maruko shrugged with a playful smile. She believed Yagi would steer Izuku in the right direction. So, has the HPSC said anything yet? Nothing yet, but they are going to hold a press conference this morning to inform the public of what they know. They are going to leave out some details, namely my condition. Yagi replied. That makes sense. Izuku agreed, taking his cell phone from the nightstand next to his bed. They should be starting any moment now. Wait, postponed? Hearing Izuku, Yagi and Rumi moved near his bed and looked down at his phone. A live news report showed that the press conference had indeed been postponed for later this evening. I guess they need more time to work on their cover stories. Maruko guessed, flexing her ears. Yagi sighed as he ran a hand through his hair. Curious, Izuku turned up the volume on his phone to hear the rest of the report. The HPSC had given no word on the reason for the delay, but has said that the conference will be held tonight. There is still no official statement about the current state of Island, but it can be theorized that the near destruction of the seafaring facility is catastrophic, and the estimated cost of the damages is estimated to be within the trillions. But the events of the Island siege can once again be traced back to the currently unidentified vigilante. Many of the liberated captives of the island claim that the vigilante saved them, but investigators are unconvinced and believe that the suspect had ulterior motives. We at the network still have no concrete information on him, but he is rumored to still be at large. The press conference tonight should hopefully shed some light on the vigilante, who is already the most wanted man in Japan. Izuku pressed the mute button and glanced at Yagi worriedly. The HPSC doesn't know anything about him, do they? No. Yagi shook his head reluctantly. No one knew the slightest thing about this man. Don't throw in the towel yet. Some new info might pop up sometime. Rumi encouraged. Anyway, I should probably get back to my hospital room for some rest. Rumi went for the door, but not before looking over her shoulder at Izuku with a sly grin. You know, you showed some damn good skills back on Island. I don't normally do internships, but I'm willing to make an exception. Wait, you really, huh? Midoriya sputtered in surprise. Him? Interning with the number 5 pro hero of Japan? That's honestly not a bad idea. Yagi rubbed his chin in agreement. Rumi is a highly proficient fighter. You could learn a thing or two from her. And by that, he means I can turn you into a bona fide ass-kicking machine. If you want real combat training from a pro, don't be afraid to come find me. But bye. She left with a wink. Izuku was left with a flabbergasted expression, his brain still trying to process what just happened. First, he interned with All Might's mentor, and now he was going to train with Maruko? I meant what I said. Training with her could help you out in the long run. A hero not only trains his mind and body, but also in self-defense. Rumi has years of kickboxing experience under her belt. It'll benefit you greatly when fighting a villain. Yagi reasoned assuredly. I just hope she doesn't get too rough with you. Why, yeah. Izuku scratched the side of his cheek, nervous about what Maruko's training was like. He stared back down at his phone, which was playing another news report showing the vigilante again. He unmuted it as Yagi joined him in watching it. Rumors continue to persist about the identity of the vigilante as detectives struggle in their search for clues regarding the suspect. The vigilante's excessive brutality against the leader of the League of Villains at the Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall evokes similar comparisons to Kaizomo Akaguro during his tenure as the vigilante Stendhal, before his eventual transformation into the infamous villain, Stain the Hero Killer. Again, we can only hope that tonight's press conference will reveal who this man is. Izuku and Yagi looked at each other worriedly. The deepening air of mystery that surrounded the vigilante only served to hammer home just how much they didn't know a thing about him. Mizuta-fu, General Hospital, 4th floor. Maruko was on her way back to her room, jogging through the empty hallway as she did. She stumbled a little as she neared her door, but managed to grab onto the armrest of a waiting room chair to stop her fall. Rumi sat down and huffed in frustration as she felt her legs shake. Ugh. Come on, legs. Work with me here. Pardon me, ma'am. Do you require aid? Rumi glanced up at a tall man wearing a traditional doctor's garb extending his hand to her. He was very thin and had bright orange hair that stuck up like they were flames, while his curly goatee and elongated eyebrows were just as orange. His rather long, beak-like nose and wide eyes with green irises gave him a rather mischievous appearance, but still exuded an air of trustworthiness. Thanks, Doc. But I'm cool, Rumi assured him as she got back up. My room's just over there. Very well. The staff here are more than welcome to help you if you need anything. The doctor responded politely. I'll keep that in mind. Later, Maruko waved goodbye as she walked down the hall and entered her room, closing the door behind her. Out in the empty hallway, the doctor stared at her closed door. A sinister smile as thin as a razor blade stretched across his face. The doctor's clothing began to shift and change like a mirage into a dark green Norse tunic with a gold belt and symbols along the cuffs and collar. He wore loose-fitting, baggy gray kirtle trousers with leather bands wrapped around the bottom of his legs, and also wore brown Jorvik boots with metal soles. Holstered around his decorative belt were 2 curved daggers with small chains around each hilt. At the ends of the chains were tufts of mistletoe. A green, spiny snake resembling a bush viper slithered along his shoulder out of nowhere and traveled down the length of his arm until it coiled around his palm. The man held his hand up and gently caressed the viper's chin with his finger. The viper uttered a series of hisses like it was communicating with him. Why, yes, my pet. The man agreed as he turned around and walked down the hall. I believe she very well could be. To be continued. Chapter 30. The Reliquary. Ireland, Dublin Airport. Mirai Sasaki's tired eyes scanned the message on his phone for the umpteenth time. Since his flight was delayed for a few minutes, he sat on a vacant seat in the waiting area and pored over the information sent to him last night. Things were not looking good over in Japan. Island had been utterly decimated. The Steel Sabers had been annihilated. 48 pro heroes had been incapacitated, and All Might could only maintain his enhanced state for 1 hour a day due to burning through a tremendous amount of One for All. And the perpetrator was a single vigilante. How was it possible that one man could do so much damage in a single night? But that was a rhetorical question. The pictures, information, and security camera footage the HPSC and Principal Nizu had sent him were some of the most horrifying things he had seen in his entire life. Each one consisted of the vigilante dismembering the Sabers in savagely creative ways while utilizing weaponry that looked far too advanced to be made. The man was also in possession of a fully sentient AI, if that could be believed. But what made him extremely dangerous was that he was stronger than All Might and held himself back during their entire fight. This was a worst-case scenario. Even if the vigilante still showed mercy, it did nothing to erase Nitai's creeping fear over the situation. That psychopath was still out there, and there was no way to know what his next move was. At first, Nitai believed that this could very well be the man who would lead All Might down to the inevitable path of being killed by a dangerous villain in his vision. But he dashed those thoughts away when he rationalized that if it were true, Mirai would have seen the vigilante in his vision. But he didn't. Nitai's foresight had always been 100% accurate. So why couldn't he see the vigilante in All Might's future? The subject reminded him of what happened to Ragdoll after she tried to use scan on the vigilante. Instantaneous mental instability. The photos Nizu sent him of the scrawlings she made on the wall sent a chill down his spine. He scrolled through his photos until he came upon the bloody symbol of the vigilante along with his grotesque message. Mirai had been studying that symbol nonstop last night when he received the photos. At first glance, one would assume the vigilante made that symbol up in his head and it didn't mean a thing. But Miria's intuition was telling him that there was more to this symbol than meets the eye, and he knew some contacts of his that could help decipher the smaller symbols arranged around the main one. What perplexed him was Tomoko scrawling that same symbol on the wall when she had never set foot on Island. How could she have known beforehand? Perhaps the vigilante's suit had a defense system that affects those with mental-type quirks. He needed more information before he could make that assumption. However, glancing up from his phone, Nitai saw everyone in the waiting area glued to a large screen monitor watching a news report about Island. Nitai grimaced, knowing Island's collapse would plunge the economy into a freefall. Another cause for concern was that the League of Villains was involved with the Sabers, meaning that All for One was making his move. But that move had more than likely failed due to interference from the vigilante, making the man a target for AFO's agents. This would result in innocent people getting dragged into the crossfire between the vigilante and the LOV if that was the case. He heard an announcement on the intercom that his flight was now boarding. Sir Nitai sighed as he put away his phone and picked up his briefcase. The 2.5 months he spent here was unfortunately a wasted effort. The European branch of the HPSC had asked for his assistance in searching for a missing pro-hero named Shamrocker. The hero had been missing since April, and the HPSC of Europe highly requested Mirai to aid in the search. Regrettably, the trail had gone completely cold. Nitai couldn't find any leads despite his detective skills and insistence that he could find a clue somewhere down the line. But after 2 months of zero progress, the European HPSC reluctantly called off the search, much to the devastation of Shamrocker's family. It hurt Mirai to break the news to the family. If he had more time, he would have been able to locate him or at least discover a clue. He pleaded with the HPSC to give him more time, but they could not spare any more resources or money to continue with the search. As much as Sir Nitai wanted to stay, he needed to head back to Japan and ascertain the damage done to Yagi, as well as conduct an investigation into the vigilante. As he went over to the line of passengers, he never noticed the 2 winged figures that were invisible to him darting through the air past the windows. Ireland Glandor, County Cork, Dromberg Stone Circle. After a mere half an hour of flying, Uriel and Usual finally arrived at their destination. A simple dirt path with short cobblestone walls and shrubbery on each side. They walked down the pathway until they came upon an axial stone circle in the middle of a large field offering a magnificent view of the Irish countryside as the afternoon sun shone down upon the landscape. They entered the clearing, taking note that they weren't the first ones there. Azrael was present, standing near the stones while gazing upon the valley in the background. The 2 archangels approached Azrael, who turned to them and smiled. "Brother, sister, it's good to see you came." The angel of death greeted, happy to see his siblings. "As are we," Uriel replied. She and her brother returned their brother's welcoming smile with their own. She surveyed their surroundings for any prying eyes. "Are we? You needn't worry. A ward has been placed around the area. No one will see us, hear us, or come near this area," Azrael assured. "Have you been waiting long for us?" Usual asked. "Hardly. I've been waiting for the others to arrive," Azrael answered. Before Uriel could ask who her brother was talking about, a smoky, green, and white portal materialized a few feet away from them. The archangels did not draw their weapons since they already knew who it was. Emerging from the portal were the four horsemen atop their steeds, the ominous clopping of hoofs fueling the foreboding atmosphere. The horses stopped as the riders dismounted, each steed disappearing in their unique way. Despair dissipated into a mist-like cloud, ruin vanished in a burst of flames, rampage blinked away in a bright flash, and mayhem dissolved into dust which blew away. Azrael, it has been a while. Death greeted as he walked up to the archangel, having to crane his neck upwards due to the being's height. Likewise, Azrael bowed his head. Death, meet the angel of death. Strife jumped in between the two. Angel of death, this is death. Or have you already met? Not now. The two deadpan together. Great. What did they used to call it, Stereo? Strife pouted as he sulked away. Childish humor aside, it has been too long since we last met. Were said as he and Uriel shook hands. Quite. Uriel agreed. I believe the last time we all saw each other was during the End War. It was millennia ago, but it felt like yesterday. And yet none of us have changed a bit since then. Fury remarked as she flashed Usual a sultry grin. Except for you, dear Usual. Look at all of those rings under your eyes. Usual appeared confused. You are aware that we angels can't age, do you? Sometimes your kind can't take a joke. Fury sighed. Let's focus back on the matter at hand. Death spoke before anyone else got off track. Have you come here to review the Helix Stone? Yes. This was per the orders of the Prime Council. Uriel answered. Are we to assume you are here on behalf of the Eternal Balance? Yup, but we gotta wait for Ulthane to buzz us in. As soon as Strife said that, blue glowing runes appeared on the stone as they began to vibrate. Light shot out from the runes and zipped around the center of the circle before forming a large, oval-shaped white portal that shimmered like water. Boy, talk about good timing. The archangels and the horsemen entered the portal, and once they had all gone through, the entryway vanished along with the runes. Silence returned to the area as if nothing happened at all. The reliquary, 250 miles beneath the Earth's surface. The group exited the portal and stepped upon a hexagonal stone platform with four massive boulders hovering above it. The boulders were carved into abstract shapes and had runes that were aglow but soon dimmed as the portal shrunk into itself. They crossed the long stone bridge that led into a series of winding hallways lit by torches along with red-colored carpets with gold trimmings. They walked through the corridor, took a right, and entered what could be only described as the mother of all libraries. Rows upon rows of bookcases stretched on for what seemed like forever. Each book was written in a different language, contained tales of Earth's lost history before the End War, and even held detailed encyclopedias about the gods as well as other races across the universe. But it did not stop there. The walls themselves were also lined with tomes, grimoires, spellbooks, ancient stories, and more reached as high up as the ceiling. Do you guys think the Crowfather has time to read all this? Strife asked absent-mindedly. You should ask him. Death responded. They left the library and entered another hallway where they followed the sounds of clanging that got louder as they progressed. Taking another series of lefts and rights, the horsemen and the archangels entered an expansive, primeval forge. It was a circular area with a flowing river of molten slag on one side and a stream of running, crystal-clear water on the other. Racks lined with dozens of exotic weapons hung from the walls surrounding the forge. The ceiling had luminescent crystalline stalactites which acted as the room's natural light. In the back of the large room were 5 towering stones adorned with foreboding faces carved into them and covered in vines. Numerous lit candles were placed around them. In the center of the room was a single being methodically slamming a smithing hammer upon a large anvil. Sensing the other's arrival, he ceased his work and placed the hammer back on the anvil before turning around. The being in question was 17 feet tall with an incredibly broad body shape and almost the size of a small house. His arms and legs were as big and thick as fully grown tree trunks. His hands could easily engulf a regular person's head, and his feet were strong enough to leave footprints in the hardest of metals. Blue tattoos covered his heavily muscled arms and abdomen that appeared to be a mix of different ethnic origins, namely Scottish, Irish, Celtic, Norse, and Germanic. He wore dark pants, and steel shoes with metal plates along his feet. His brown blacksmith apron had dozens of pockets and was held up by a hefty leather belt with a large gold buckle with a blue Celtic triad symbol emblazoned in the center. His right hand was covered in leather straps while his left wrist was wrapped in chains. There was a circular shield buckler tied to the chains bearing the same symbol on his belt buckle. His shoulder armor added to his intimidating appearance, while a navy blue hood scarf was wrapped around his neck. Speaking of intimidating, his face was vaguely human, stocky and wide with a flat nose and pointed ears. He had a slight underbite with two canines poking up from behind his lower lip. His hair, done up in a ponytail, sideburns, and short baron were an auburn color while his eyes were a mystifying blue and white. This being was part of the Jotnar, a race of massive, powerful humanoids that existed alongside man during the First Age. Whereas humanity were the children of the Creator, the Jotnar were the children of Danu. The four horsemen approached the Jotun, while the archangels stayed near the entrance. Ulthane, Death greeted. The atmosphere between the Nephilim and the Jotun was unnaturally hostile. You got a lot of nerve, showing your faces round here. Ulthane growled in a heavy Scottish accent as he towered over them. The angels tensed up as the horsemen glared at Ulthane, slowly inching their hands to their weapons. Even though the riders were demigods, a Jotun could easily match them in raw strength alone. A few tense seconds passed. Just messin' with ye. Ulthane loudly laughed. How you been, laddies? The horseman relaxed in response. You do this every time we meet, Ulthane. War said tiredly. What's a little chummy banter between friends, Ulthane humorously reasoned. Besides, all of you end up getting ready for a brawl when I'll pull the stunt every time, so we're both bloody guilty. You make it sound so convincing. Strife reasoned, playfully slugging Ulthane in the arm. The Jotun showed no reaction to the non-threatening hit, let alone even flinch. You know, Ulthane, if you truly wish to test your mettle against us, we'd be more than welcome to oblige you. Fury challenged Ulthane, albeit in a sassy tone to indicate her playful side. Speak for yourself, sister. Death drawled, folding his arms. Come on. You know I couldn't do the lass. After everything we've been through, you're all practically like siblings to me. Ulthane professed honestly. Fury appeared to look both confused and mortified at that proclamation. She didn't know whether she should feel flattered or repulsed. That is debatable, Fury remarked unsurely. Oh, go scare a nun, ye grumpy bint. Ulthane waved off the Nephilim. He turned his attention to the angels waiting near the doorway. Well, don't mind our banter, pigeons. You're certainly welcome to join in. Normally, an angel would take some offense at being called a pigeon, but Uriel, Usual, and Azrael had known Ulthane long enough to know that it was just a friendly nickname. We simply did not want to interrupt your reunion, Uriel stated politely. Nor your work. Oh, you mean this? Ulthane pointed to an oversized, double-bladed broadsword lying on the anvil. This is nothing. Just a hobby fair killing time. I haven't been completely out of work, though. Had to help out some of me kin over in the Andromeda Galaxy. He continued as he placed his smithing hammer in his apron pocket. As much as AHD loved to put the kettle on and regale you lot with a story, I suppose you're here on business? Strictly, Ulthane. Death confirmed. We have all come here under orders to study the Helix Stone for any clues about the doomslayer. I figured as much. Ulthane dusted off his hands. The Crowfather hasn't stopped taking a gander at the blasted rock ever since the Slayer dropped out of the sky. I'll take you time. Ulthane lumbered towards the exit due to his enormous frame as everyone followed him. As they went through the halls, Strife went up next to him. So have you given it any thought about joining us? Strife asked. The Five Horsemen of the Apocalypse has a good ring to it. AHD love Ta, but you already know I got responsibilities as the Watcher o' Earth. Ulthane answered. Besides, HM worried the eternal balance would shrink me down to a wee little bugger like you if I did join ye. Well, at least I wouldn't have to keep looking up at you if it came to that. Strife reasoned, earning a chuckle from Ulthane. As the two started conversing, the other horsemen and the angels quietly observed them as they followed. Strife never stops trying to convince him. Fury shook her head in apparent pity for her brother as she walked next to war and death. For some odd reason, I never tire of seeing Strife fail to convince him. As dogged as he may be, Strife's inability to know when to quit is his greatest strength. War attested, he never gives up nor surrenders. It's that dogged attitude of his that helped him survive through the end war. Ulthane was invaluable during our fight against the Fallen and fought alongside us for most of the war. On that note, the Eternal Balance stated that Ulthane was a candidate for a potential fifth horseman. Death further elaborated, but he's not in a film. He's not even family. Fury pointed out, family comes in many forms, Fury. Azrael said, floating beside her. Anyone can share a familial bond if they prove themselves worthy of that honor, and I believe that Ulthane already became a part of your small family long ago. Uriel and Usual shared a heartwarming smile at their brother's wisdom. War and Death's stern expressions did not change, but they too secretly shared Azrael's view on the subject of family. As it stood, the four horsemen were the last living Nephilim in the universe. It was a miracle that they were chosen by the Eternal Balance to be its enforcers and became immortal demigods so that the four of them would not fade into distant memory. Perhaps there was some merit to Azrael's words. Fury did not share the Archangel's sanctimonious preachings, but did not visibly express her indignation. After a while, they exited the corridor after a few turns and found themselves in the Reliquaries Museum. The room itself was just as, if not bigger, than the library and contained thousands of glass display cases atop stone podiums. The cases were varied in different sizes, each of them containing artifacts from the First Age that were of great importance. There were all kinds of relics, pieces of Hrungnir's whetstone, the scales of Anubis, Rajan's drums, a tooth from the mighty giant Humbaba, the golden fleece, the 10 Commandments, Sun Wukong's headband, and many others. They followed the red carpet that led to another room at the end of the museum, where the Helix Stone was located. As the group went past the cases, Uriel stopped before one case to the right, which held a familiar crown made of thorns. She tensed up, swallowing uncomfortably before following her brethren and allies. The group entered the dimly lit hallway and came into the next room, which vastly differed from the museum. It appeared to be a personal study. It was a circular room like Ulthane's forge, but smaller. There were wooden tables with archaic archaeological equipment on them and numerous stacks of books scattered around. There were lit torches around the room, giving it enough light to reveal the group's objective in the center of the room, the Helix Stone. But they were not alone. Someone else was in the room before them, studying the stone meticulously while jotting down notes on a scroll with a black feather quill pen. A cawing sound was heard from above, and a pitch-black crow flew into view, perching itself atop the figure's shoulder and cawed at him. Yes, I know they're here. You can cease your infernal squawking. The curmudgeon grunted as he set his scroll and pen down on a desk next to him. The Crowfather turned himself around and smiled at his guests. The Crowfather was a Jotun, one of the oldest known, and while not as gargantuan as Ulthane, was still taller than the average human. He wore heavy brown robes with a red cloak along with a pelt made of crow feathers. Holstered around his waist were assorted baubles, lanterns, keys, vials, heavy books, and the like. He had a wizened appearance, sunken-in eyes, frail-looking hands, and an incredibly long beard along with equally long eyebrows. His eyes had a green hue to them, unlike Ulthane's blue and white. Ah, our esteemed guests. It's been centuries since we had visitors. The Crowfather kindly greeted with a bow. The pleasure is ours, Crowfather. Usual bowed as well. Your wisdom is called upon this day. Wisdom? When was the last time anyone asked me for that? The Crowfather mused rhetorically while stroking his beard. Death stepped forward. This is a matter of great importance, Archivist. You know why we are here. We need answers regarding him. The Crowfather stared at Death for a couple of seconds before sighing. I too have been searching for answers, but I have found very little. He then went over to the Helix Stone as everyone followed him. They all stared up at the relic. It was no less foreboding than the first time they saw it. The Helix Stone was a monolithic slab of gray-colored rock that could only be found within the Dark Realm. Carved into the stone was a mural that depicted the doomslayer himself emerging from a glowing doorway behind him. His posture was hunched over, and his fists were tightly clenched. An unearthly light shone from his visor, while his telltale symbol was imprinted on his chest plate. There was a message at the bottom of the mural that took up most of the slab, written in a demonic language that they could understand since it was translated a long time ago. We demons, who have existed since the dawn of creation, fear nothing. Whether it is against our kin or the gods themselves, we show no cowardice. But one day he will come, a once mortal man burned by the embers of the dark realm and bathed in the blood of demonkind. He will be the only thing we truly fear. He is the Ripper, the Tearer, the Gouger, the Slasher, the teeth in the darkness and the talons in the night. His fury is that of a trillion burning suns, and he will bring ruination to us all. He is known as the Bane of Hell, the Hellwalker, the Unchained Predator, the Destroyer of Evil, the Scourge of Hell, and the right hand of the Creator. He is the doomslayer. Everyone was silent for a while until Uriel broke the silence. Could it be possible that this foretold his arrival? The demons wouldn't have made this up if they knew that for sure. War remarked. Correct you are. The Crowfather agreed. We must not forget that this stone was found within the main cities of the Ars Goshen demons. They were not only powerful demons in command of legions, but were also the wisest in hell, second only to the Charred Council themselves. Perhaps one of those greater demons received a prophetic vision of the Doomslayer and wrote this as some form of warning. Usual deduced. But if that were true, then wouldn't the Slayer have appeared during the End War? So where the bloody hell was he then? Althane questioned. Could A helped us in the war much earlier? 40 years is too long fair a war to last. Late to the party? Strife shrugged. His arrival here does seem out of place. Let us all review what we already know. Azrael began. The End War is over. The Dark Lord and the Hell Gods that made up the Charred Council have been destroyed by the Creator and the Prime Council. The Fallen, the Seven Sin Generals, the Ars Goetia, and the Nephilim that aided the Dark Realm are effectively wiped out. There are no more higher caste demons that can assume leadership or ascend to a Hell God. The Creator has strengthened the Seven Seals so that Hell can never launch another invasion. We have taken all of the necessary steps and precautions to ensure that the apocalypse will never happen again. We now live in a time of everlasting peace. Hell's flame has been permanently snuffed out. Which brings us back to the question at hand. Why is he here? Fury reminded him. Azrael did not have an answer. That is until Usual spoke up again. When I was observing him nary a few days before, I noticed that he appeared to be lost. He was going in no clear direction or purpose. It could be possible that he came here unintentionally. Usual explained. Or maybe, sent here against his will. War furrowed his brow. We can explore those possibilities soon enough. The Crowfather eased the two. At the very least, let us take another look at the second half of the stone. He gestured over to a large chunk of rock on a nearby table. A lower portion of the helix stone had broken off at some point before its discovery within the Dark Realm, but had been recovered, albeit with some damage. Death, Uriel, Azrael, and Strife took a closer look at the stone. It was another mural, this time showing the Doomslayer standing upon a pile of demon skulls with two large weapons in his hands. To the Slayer's left, there appeared to be some indication that someone was standing next to him, but the left side of the stone had been heavily damaged, leaving it impossible to know who this person's identity was. The message at the bottom was thankfully still legible. And he shall be joined by another. One whose rage, strength, and ferocity are equal to his own. Together, they will rain destruction, death, and devastation upon all they deem evil. So it looks like we'll get a second Doomslayer down the road at some point. Should we be worried or scared enough to void our bowels? Strife guessed humorously. This is the same image Tomoko Shiritoko drew. Uriel recognized, much to her shock. The Crowfather hurried over and took a closer look at the stone. Are you certain of this? Yes. She etched this into a wall during her brief fit of insanity when she tried to use her blessing on the Slayer. Uriel confirmed. Did she draw the complete version of this mural? Do we know who the second Slayer is? Death asked as he pointed to the ruined section of the helix stone piece. Uriel shook her head, causing Death to narrow his eyes in frustration. And I suppose we can't learn anything else from her? No. The Creator tasked one of my brothers to rid her of the visions to spare her feeling from any more pain. Uriel answered. Yeesh. Typical angels, always schmeckling around with mortals' heads when they can't handle the truth. Strife dismissively voiced his annoyance towards the Ascendant Realm's policies. Uriel regarded Strife with displeasure at his comment. Ulthane could sense an argument brewing, so he decided to step in. Don't take his words too personally, lass. The creator did right by the girl, but sooner or later, the secret's gonna have to come out. Ulthane reasoned. Uriel sighed as Azrael patted her shoulder to comfort her. That much is true, but the mortals are not ready to learn about the Ascendant Realm yet. Speaking of, has the Prime Council decided what to do about the Slayer yet? The Crowfather inquired. They are divided on what to do about him, Azrael revealed, much to the surprise of the Nephilim and the Jotnar. The Creator, Jesus, Buddha, Vishnu, Krishna, and Anahita are discussing potential talks with the Doomslayer in the hopes that he could be reasoned with. Zeus, Odin, Ra, and Danu believe that he should be contained in the event he poses a threat to the Ascendant Realm. Amaterasu, Cain, Quetzalcoatl, Ahura Mazda, and Olorin are undecided. For the Horsemen, the Crowfather, and Ulthane, this was completely unheard of. The Prime Council had never been so split on a subject like this before. Fury cast an uncertain glance up at the Helix Stone, focusing on the Slayer. To think that one man could rile the Council to such an extent. It's not just the Prime Council that's been affected, but the other gods as well. Athena, Thoth, Laozi, Mimir, Nabu, Sarasvati, and many other wisdom gods are forming a think tank to discern the Doomslayer's origins and predict what his next move will be. Usual informed. To complicate matters further, some of the more battle-hungry gods like Heracles, Thor, Tezcatlipoca, Anhur, and Guan Yu are honestly thinking about dueling the Slayer. Those buggers need a change. Ulthane laughed as he slapped his knee. I'd love to see them try. I honestly dread the thought. Usual muttered to himself. What about the eternal balance? The Crowfather asked Death. What did it have to say? The presence of the Doomslayer has not affected the overall balance of the universe. There has been no disruption whatsoever. Death responded. However, we will remain vigilant if he does. And before any of you ask, we are not sure if we could defeat him. War spoke intensely, which spoke volumes of his view on the Doomslayer. A feeling of dread crept up on everyone in the room. Could any of them stand a chance against a being that all of hell was truly afraid of? We should not be viewing him as a threat. As dangerous as he is, he has repeatedly shown to have a degree of mercy, if not outright valor. Uriel defended. He came to my island to save hostages when the heroes were unable to, protected a group of children that were about to be executed, and showed restraint when the pro-heroes tried to stop him. They still fought him after he showed them he didn't want to. The bloody daft sods. Ulthane grunted in disapproval. Hey, that's what they get for poking a rattlesnake. Strife snickered. But Uriel does kinda have a point. I mean, if the Doomslayer's only purpose is killing demons, then we shouldn't have anything to worry about. So what if he kills a few villains? It's not like he's going to go after us, am I right? That's exactly the problem, brother. He should only be eradicating demons, not mortals. War clarified sternly. However, I too agree with Uriel. The Slayer does not kill the innocent. We can only observe him. That is all any of us can do for now. Death lowered his head. The Crowfather smiled as he held up a lantern from his belt. Well, you aren't the only ones observing him. The lantern glowed an emerald green and shone a light onto the cobblestone floor. The light showed an image of the Bane of Hell constructing some kind of large machine within an abandoned subway. Ulthane knelt down on one knee to take a closer look and rubbed his chin curiously. Any idea what he's futzing with? Strife asked him. Ulthane shook his head. Not the foggiest, laddie. Azrael stared at the Slayer and thought back to when he was almost spotted. Perhaps the Slayer was slightly aware of his presence, but possibly still couldn't see him. This was something he would have to bring up with the other angels back home if they were ever sent to keep watch on the Doomslayer. What of the artificial intelligence he carries with him? The stone made no mention of it. Usual brought up. I'm not so sure of it myself. Perhaps the Goshen demons couldn't predict everything about the Slayer. The Crowfather theorized. Is there any way we could anticipate what he's going to do next? What did the seers have to say about him? Fury asked the archangels while the Crowfather's lamp dimmed, turning off the image. His fate is unwritten and can alter the fates of those around him, including ours. Azrael replied in a grave tone. The Nephilim regarded him with shock and unease. This situation just kept becoming more complicated and unpredictable as it went on. Death let out an irritated sigh. We're done here. We've gathered as much information as we could. Let us return to the basilica. Death announced as he left the room. The other horsemen followed after him. I wish you luck in your investigations. War nodded his head to the others. Until we see each other again. Fury winked. Catch you on the flip side. Strife waved. The three of them left a room, and there was a green glow from outside the entrance, indicating that the horsemen had returned to their lair. I suppose it is time for us to return home as well, Azrael said to the Crowfather and Ulthane. We will keep you updated with any news regarding the Doomslayer. Aye, so will we. Ulthane nodded. Uriel and Usual bowed their head to the two Jotuns as a way of saying farewell before they departed with Azrael. The two waited for a few moments after the angels left through to door to make sure they had left. Once silence was heard, Ulthane folded his arms. You didn't bring up all fair one. Ulthane narrowed his eyes at the Crowfather. They were too focused on the Slayer. The Crowfather reasoned as he turned his gaze to the Helix Stone. Besides, I have a feeling that they already know the inevitable confrontation between the two. In fact, the Slayer could end the threat that man poses for good. I could have stopped him myself, but you never let me. Ulthane angrily barked, jabbing a meaty finger at the Crowfather as the elderly Jotun turned around. AHM a watcher. AHM supposed to protect this planet like the rest o' me kin. And you do. Numerous times you have safeguarded this world, but it is not like the others. It's fragile. You know that. The Crowfather raised his voice despite the strain it put on his aged vocal cords. Ulthane sneered before backing down and uttering a displeased grunt through his teeth. So what? You think the Slayer could do a better job o' killing all fair one than me? Ulthane grumpily accused. Hardly. You could eliminate all for one just as easily. But it would be for the best if we simply stayed out of the Doomslayer's path for now. However, I believe his ability to alter fate may finally end the vicious cycle that entraps bearers of one for all. The Crowfather reasoned. Ulthane pondered the Crowfather's words for a moment. You think we might finally find out what happened to their souls? Maybe, but until then, the ones that created OFA and AFO blessings are the only ones who know, and they still won't tell us. The Crowfather tensed a little at the thought of the two gods who created those blessings. Despite their good intentions, those powers caused nothing but trouble for countless generations. What I do hope is that Izuku Midoriya will be spared from an early grave. Aye, the poor lad. Ulthane lamented. If the Slayer can avert fate, I guess this means Izuku won't be another lost soul in this unending squabble. The Crowfather looked up at the mural of the Doomslayer. Maybe so, Ulthane. We can only hope. In another part of the reliquary, a figure emerged from the shadows and covertly navigated through the hallways until he came before a large, locked steel door. Undeterred, the intruder pulled out a key he had managed to procure from raiding one of the many rooms in the reliquary. He unlocked the door and entered, immediately taking in the sight of dozens of arcane devices on shelves, tables, or within locked chests. He quietly walked through the room until he found what he was looking for. Floating within a glass case upon a stone podium like the ones in the museum was a hellstone. A pitch-black crystal covered in demonic sigils that would allow anyone possessing it to travel into the dark realm, bypassing the seven seals without destroying them. All but two of these accursed stones were destroyed after the End War. One was given to the four horsemen of the apocalypse while the other was granted to the assigned Watcher of Earth, Ulthane. Sensing no traps, the figure carefully removed the case and plucked the crystal, smiling in satisfaction. In his free hand, he conjured a duplicate of the Hellstone out of thin air. This copy of the Hellstone was unable to allow travel to Hell, but still looked exactly like a real Hellstone. He placed the copy on the podium, stashed the real Hellstone in his pocket, and put back the glass case. He left the room, making sure to lock the door behind him to not arouse any suspicion from the Jotuns. He slipped into the shadows as a quicker means to traverse the winding hallways until he came before Ulthane's room. A green viper slithered out from his sleeve and coiled around the key in his hand. The reptile then dropped to the floor and wriggled its way underneath the door to put the key back where it was. After a brief few seconds, the viper returned the same way it entered the room and slithered up the intruder's leg. He grinned victoriously, though a little bit more insidiously. Even if Ulthane discovered the fake Hellstone, there was no way to know how the real one was stolen. Loki, the Norse god of mischief and darkness, and his pet Jormungandr melted into the shadows and disappeared, leaving the reliquary completely unnoticed. Will's returning. To be continued. Chapter 31. New target. Turns out this guy and his fucking pals, they were knocking this place dead for years. I wanted everybody to know that things were changed around here. We had to make an example of these pricks that the party was over. Sam Rothstein, Casino. Beneath Muzutafu the Slayer's hideout. 8:35 p.m. Calibrations complete. You may now activate the fabricator. Taggart took a moment to take a gander at what he and Vega had created. It would have taken a normal human being several months, up to a year or more, to complete this technological undertaking. But thanks to Vega's instructions, some workarounds, using the support items to create specific parts, and the fact that he did not require sleep nor rest, he was able to build it in just 2 days. The device resembled a city bus-sized printing press. It was made from a jet-black carbon fiber material, and the machine was almost as long as the subway cars in the derelict station. A keypad and a small monitor were on the side along with a jutted-out tray. A long conveyor belt stretched out from the front of the machine, while the support items were housed within the machine, installed during its creation and serving as vital components. Now all that was left was to turn it on. Because it used an internal power source Vega had him create via the support items, he didn't have to hook any wires up to the generator. He went behind the fabricator and located the small lever and button next to it. He pulled the lever, causing the machine to utter a dull hum, and then depressed the button. The fabricator activated. The monitor revealed Vega's symbol, and the keyboard lights flickered on. The machine continued to hum, though inaudibly, which was a boon. No nosy intruders would hear it and discover the Slayer's location. All systems are fully nominal. The fabricator is at 100% operating efficiency. We may now begin upgrading your equipment. The Doomslayer smiled in anticipation, but one question lingered in his head. Why the need for upgrades? His gears served him fine, and they were not under any threat at the moment, but the Slayer trusted Vega with his equipment. Please dispense your UAC grenades and hologram projectors into the tray. The Doomslayer did as requested, taking several of his grenades along with his holograms out of his Hammerspace backpack and into the fabricator tray. The tray retracted into the machine, and blue lights glowed from within the fabricator. The sounds of machinery disassembling and reformatting his weapons at a brisk pace were heard as the conveyor belt activated. After a few short seconds, the conveyor rolled out his equipment into view as they emerged from the small opening. His grenades now resembled metal WW2 era stick grenades, while his hologram projectors had a cubicle redesign. Upgrades complete. Your UAC grenades are now lighter and carry a bigger payload of explosives. When thrown at an enemy, the grenade will automatically activate the pincushion function and adhere to its targets before detonation. The Doomslayer grasped one of the grenades by the handle, and when he held it up, an array of long spikes jutted out from the grenade head. Nodding in approval, the Slayer pocketed the rest of his grenades into his Hammerspace backpack. He picked up one of the hologram projectors and raised an eyebrow at the now peculiar design. Your hologram projectors will now create a hard-light duplicate of yourself. The construct is armed with your heavy assault rifle that is, like itself, a hard-light object and uses ammunition made of the same material. However, it cannot use your other weapons as well as their mods. By linking myself to it, I can control the copy to assist you in combat. The duplicate will function indefinitely and will detonate in a disorienting explosion similar to that of a flashbang grenade on my command. The description alone almost made the Slayer giddy. He pressed the button on the side of the projector and tossed it to the floor. As soon as it hit the ground, four insect-like legs unfolded from the cube, and a blue light glowed around it. A polygonal light green humanoid materialized into thin air and stood in front of the Doomslayer. Its appearance then distorted like television static before reforming into a completely identical clone of the Slayer. A heavy assault rifle formed in its hands, and Vega controlled the duplicate to take up a gun salute stance. Impressed, the Doomslayer held out his fist to the clone. Having observed the Slayer performing a similar gesture to a miniaturized toy in his likeness, Vega made the clone respond in kind. The two of them fist-bumped each other, pulling their hands back and twiddling their fingers afterward. The clone vanished and retracted itself back into the holographic projector. Flynn picked it back up and placed it in his hammerspace backpack. Next, a new melee weapon to replace your chainsaw. I will need your remaining combat knives and the limbs you procured from the Nomu. The Bane of Hell placed 13 knives into the tray before pulling out the two torn-off arms of the Nomu, the chainsaw blades still attached. As soon as he set them down, a port opened up above the tray, and dozens of spindly appendages ending in sharp tips emerged. The tips glowed red-hot and began cutting apart the limbs like a hot knife through butter, disintegrating the skin and bone with ease. The appendages retracted back into the fabricator once the skin and bone had been cleared away from the saws, leaving only a small puddle of the Nomu's blood. The tray was then pulled into the machine so it could begin its work. The fabricator can also be used to scan materials. I have analyzed the blood sample from the Nomu and detected an unknown substance. After running diagnostics and cross-referencing similar studies of this substance from the main computer on Island, I have concluded that the creature was injected with a narcotic known as Trigger. It is a highly addictive steroidal compound that strengthens a person's quirk by directly enhancing their Q gene. The duration of its effects varies. They can last for a few minutes up to an hour. The drug has serious, often fatal, side effects: discoloration of the tongue, loss of cognitive thought, bleeding gums, thrombosis, bone density degradation, heart failure, schizophrenia, sickle cell disease, blood clotting, grand mal seizures, blockage of blood flow circulation, and irreversible physical deformities. A steroid for superpowers? That was something the Slayer didn't expect. Thinking back to all of those comic books he read as a kid, it surprised him that this kind of concept wasn't explored. What confused him was why anyone would take that drug when it had so many disastrous side effects. Either they were that desperate for power, or their common sense went out the window a long time ago. Further scans have indicated that this is an improved version of the formula known in some databases as Trigger. It has 10 times the effectiveness of regular Trigger and can last for a total of 2 hours, but the side effects are significantly worse. This variant of the drug is rarely used, only seeing circulation amongst high-profile villain organizations. I am still analyzing the Nomu's genetic structure and will update you when possible. In the meantime, the Satanas are now ready for use. The Doomslayer turned his attention to the conveyor belt and felt himself bristle with anticipation. His new weapon rolled out from the machine in all of its glory, a pair of red and black katanas with serrated chainsaw blades along with throttles and motors built into the hilts. A stylized tag depicting a Hanya mask was imprinted on the sides of the blades. Taggart picked up the weapons and depressed the throttles, each blade letting out a whirring roar that made him grin wickedly. He took several practice swings, wielding them with frighteningly skillful proficiency before depositing them in his hammerspace backpack. The Satanas utilize a synthetic fuel generator built into the hilts, eliminating the need to find spare gasoline. I have also created a variant of the hologram projector to use for our base of operations. Please place them near the entrance and the tunnels. They will create a digitized camouflage that will conceal our location from anyone who tries to find us. Additionally, the projectors have been programmed to allow you to pass through them, but prevent entry from unauthorized personnel. The fabricator printed out 5 rectangular devices that resembled his upgraded hologram projectors. He picked them up and went up the stairs that led to the entrance. He placed one block on the side of the wall near the opening, and a small port opened up on the device. A green light shone towards the entrance, and a translucent green barrier formed in front of it. It then changed into a perfect image of a realistic brick wall, giving it the appearance of a sealed-off passage. The Slayer extended his hand towards the simulated brick wall, and his hand phased right through it. This was the perfect way to fool anyone snooping around. He then proceeded to place the projectors at each subway tunnel, camouflaging them all before heading back to the fabricator. I have good news. I can replenish your ammunition supply via the fabricator. I have also successfully replicated your plasma gun cells. They do not use any Argent energy, but still have the same combat effectiveness. Unfortunately, I am unable to replicate BFG cells due to their dependency on Argent energy. I will attempt a workaround for this. Please be mindful of your remaining BFG ammunition, slash. The Slayer lowered his head in thought. This meant he only had 2 shots left for his BFG, but that was probably for the best. He, in no way or form, wanted this world to know or attempt to use Argent energy. He had seen firsthand what that power led to back on the alternate Mars. He did not wish for the same to happen here. He would have to be very careful about using his BFG until then. Slash, my last request is for you to place your weapon mods onto the tray so that I may enhance and augment their capabilities. Also, bring the remaining motorcycle over to the fabricator as well, slash. Again, the Doomslayer found himself questioning why Vega wanted to upgrade his weapons. What exactly was the big threat here? What could be out there that needed so much hardware if the world wasn't under threat from hell? Regardless, he knew the AI would give him an answer soon enough. He started by placing all of his weapon mods onto the fabricator tray and then brought over the motorcycle afterward. The back of the fabricator opened up to reveal an array of arms with various tools attached to them. The Slayer wheeled the motorcycle over to the arms, and they immediately set to work, disassembling and reformatting the vehicle in real time just as the tray with all of his mods were traced back into the machine. Slash, this will take some time to finish. In the meantime, the HPSC is currently holding a press conference as we speak. I will turn on the channel it is being hosted on. The Slayer turned around to the second invention that Vega had him build, a large supercomputer built from the portable terminal the Sabers brought with them when they stumbled into his hideout. With the help of some parts and tools the support items created, he had transformed a simple computer terminal into a shed-sized supercomputer with 3 monitors, a built-in keyboard, and made out of the same material as the fabricator. Within the supercomputer were high-tech components that this world could only dream of creating. Vega had complex knowledge of the central processing area where his AI was housed, and was able to have the support items recreate some of the parts found at the facility, which were then built into the supercomputer. Said terminal switched itself on, and the Slayer walked over to it, pulling up a subway bench for him to sit on. The screen showed 2 HPSC officials seated at a table before a large crowd of news reporters and cameramen. In the back of the room behind the representatives was a large, flat-screen TV. The Doomslayer's HUD brought up information on the 2 officials, the chairwoman of the HPSC Japanese branch, Sayaka Grant, and reputable HPSC agent, Mara Yakumuru. The 2 representatives bowed respectfully to the crowd before Sayaka went over to the podium next to the table. As this was happening, Taggart removed the parts of his Predator suit as well as his helmet that had been damaged in his fight against All Might. He easily applied pressure to the dents on the opposite side to bend them back into shape, making it look like they were never there. The Doomslayer listened to the conference as he continued to fix his suit. Thank you all for coming this evening. We will debrief you all on what we know of the events on Iceland and take any questions some of you may have. Sayaka Grant started. At approximately 9:30 p.m. on June 25th, the Steel Sabers mercenary organization enacted a full-scale invasion of the Island. Within the span of an hour, they fully captured the base and took everyone on their hostage. Visiting pro-heroes from overseas and All Might were among those who were captured. An SOS was sent out early into the siege, which was intercepted by the Japan Coast Guard. A reporter suddenly shot up from his seat, holding out his microphone. How is it they were able to capture a high-security R&D facility? We found credible evidence that they had inside help from Samuel Abraham, a researcher who sided with them. On that note, we have discovered evidence through security camera footage that the Sabers were working alongside the League of Villains, whom Samuel was also affiliated with, and we can confirm that he was killed by the Luich. They were planning to raid Island's main vault and steal all of the classified support items within. The League of Villains had arrived on Island at an undetermined time to deliver a WMD filled with the last remaining sample of VX poison gas. They were planning to detonate said device to silence any witnesses on the island once the Sabers were done with their objective. There was no way we could have known beforehand. She debriefed. There were murmurs amongst the press before another reported raised her hand. Have there been any casualties among the hostages and heroes? No. There have been 0 fatalities and the facility staff are all accounted for. The WMD was disabled and will be turned over to the United Nations for disposal. Mara answered. Focusing back on the current topic, the JSDF coordinated with law enforcement and pro-heroes to seal off a portion of the port of Tokyo. This was done to bar anyone from attempting to get close to the facility and to set up a potential counteroffensive when the time came. However, around 10:23 p.m., the cordon was breached by an unnamed vigilante, the same one seen during the Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall incident. She grabbed a small remote on the podium and turned around to the TV, pressing a button as she did. The TV turned on and showed camera footage of the vigilante stampeding his way through the port and the pro-heroes. There were many gasps of shock from the crowd as they watched him take down multiple heroes on his own. Mr. Brave, Fat Gum, Crust, Selkie, and Gang Orca were incapacitated by the vigilante, and he successfully made his way to I-Island by swimming over there. Later, when the Sabres hijacked the airwaves to deliver their demands, he commenced his attack. Several minutes later, a massive explosion decimated half of I-Island via the destruction of the Sabres' nuclear-powered submarine. There have been no radioactive contaminants following the explosion, and we are still unsure of how this is possible. He then began his one-man assault on the mercenaries afterward. Mara continued, "What's the current status of the Sabres? Are there any alive that can be taken into justice?" A reporter asked. "No. We can confirm that the entirety of the Steel Sabres organization has been completely wiped out. They, along with their leaders, are all dead. Their bodies will be cremated in order to prevent them from being seen as martyrs by other villain groups," Sayaka revealed. The Slayer smirked as he fixed his helmet and placed it back on. "You're welcome." This caused a commotion among the audience, many standing up from their seats and pointing their microphones at Sayaka as they frantically begged her for questions. The chairwoman pointed to a reporter, picking her out of the frenzied crowd as they fell silent. "BBB by one man," the reporter stuttered out. Sayaka swallowed before answering. "Yes, by one man. This vigilante has already become one of the most wanted persons of interest in Japan. He wields advanced weaponry decades ahead of anything our best scientists can create, wears impenetrable armor immune to all known forms of conventional weaponry and offensive quirks, and possesses enhanced physical strength comparable to All Might. This man is extremely dangerous and mentally unstable, as evidenced by this symbol and message he wrote upon a wall in human blood." Sayaka took the remote again and changed the image on the TV to a picture of his calling card that he left on I-Island. Everyone was rightly horrified at what they saw, but that was nothing compared to the fear they had of the vigilante, knowing that there was somebody out there who may be stronger than the symbol of peace himself. The vigilante is also in possession of a highly advanced artificial intelligence that overrode the island's previously hacked security systems, turning them against the Steel Sabres. It had also cut off communication between the HSBC and the JSDF, scrambling our best satellite in the process. We have reason to believe that the AI may very well be sentient as well. We have confirmed that he does have collaborators in the form of company names imprinted on his armor and weaponry. Mixum, I/Zero Logistics, and Union Aerospace Corporation. Sayaka continued. The doomslayer tensed up. While the UAC did not exist in this universe, he dreaded to think the kind of bad influence they would have posed to this world. The other two companies he wasn't worried about. As far as he could tell during his little adventure on the alternate Mars, they only supplied the UAC with some of their tech. They were not directly affiliated with them and probably didn't know what they were doing behind closed doors. I should point out that after reviewing several interviews law enforcement had with the hostages, the vigilante did make an effort to save their lives, Mara said before changing his tone. With that being said, however, the vigilante did steal support items from the expo and main vault, assaulted several pro-heroes, nearly destroyed I-Island, and committed mass manslaughter. We will ensure that he is punished to the fullest extent of the law. The Slayer continued to iron out the dents in his armor without a care in the world for Mara's proclamation. What's the current status of I-Island? Another reporter held out his mic. The damage to the facility is catastrophic. We estimate that the cost of the damages is well into the hundreds of trillions. Due to the extensive repairs and contamination from the bodies of the mercenaries, I-Island will remain sealed off from the public for the rest of the foreseeable future. Mara answered. All projects currently in development on the island before the siege will be halted, and any equipment or support items not destroyed during the attack will be relocated. How do you explain the multitude of wounded pro-heroes that were sent to the hospital? What happened to them? A reporter spoke up. There was a look of apprehension on Sayaka's face before she answered. During the vigilantes' assault, pro-heroes still stationed at the port of Tokyo mounted a rescue mission out of fear for the safety of the hostages and the international heroes. They arrived at Island via rescue boats belonging to the Wild Wild Pussycats and rendezvoused with All Might and the other heroes. While All Might stayed behind to oversee the civilians held at the airport, the heroes along with those from overseas set out to apprehend the vigilante. They engaged him, and Sayaka trailed off as if she knew that there would be no going back if she revealed what happened. They were all defeated by the vigilante. Taggart raised an eyebrow as he attached a portion of his shoulder armor back on before taking off his frontal chest plating. He didn't expect them to be so forward after everything that happened. The crowd was oddly silent, but that's because they were terrified. One man took down 48 pro-heroes all by himself. All Might later fought the vigilante in a protracted battle, but a section of the island collapsed, and the vigilante escaped in the confusion. The vigilante is still at large, but we will remain vigilant if he ever shows up again. The pro-heroes are expected to recover soon, while the international heroes have been sent back to their home countries at the request of their governments. Mera informed before glancing down at his watch. This concludes the conference for today, but we can answer about 4 more questions. Where did the vigilante come from? A reporter questioned. We don't know. Sayaka averted her eyes. Is his suit giving him increased strength? Came another question. That is a possibility, we don't know. Mera shrugged, unable to look at the reporter. Are you issuing a manhunt or an official investigation regarding the vigilante? Another reporter asked. Both. Mera nodded. Does he have a quirk or is he quirkless? Was the last question that came from a reporter. All eyes were on Sayaka now. There was a few seconds of silence before she lowered her head and shook it in defeat. We don't know. And that was the match that set off the metaphorical M80 firecracker. The entire room exploded with the sounds of reporters loudly begging for more questions as they raised their hands, notebooks, and microphones into the air as cameramen scrambled to get a closer shot. The last scene the Slayer watched was Sayaka trying to tell the crowd that the conference was over before the screen switched itself off. The doomslayer leaned back in his seat as he glanced down at his chest plate, which had All Might's fist imprint embedded upon it. Hearing Sayaka fib about what happened between him and All Might was understandable. No telling what kind of pandemonium would ensue if she told the public everything. Tracing a finger along the indentation, the Slayer popped out the dent until his chest plate was clear of the fist imprint. Your mod upgrades and mode of transportation are now finished. Attaching the chest plate back onto his Predator suit, the Hellwalker got up and went over to the fabricator. The first thing that graced his vision was the rebuilt chopper. It resembled a fusion of a trike motorcycle and a fucking tank. The heavily armored behemoth of a ride was covered in armored plates and heavily studded treads in place of wheels. The armor was colored dark green and bristling with weapons. 2 M61 Vulcan Gatling cannons on the sides near the handlebars, missile pods near the back, a tank barrel jutting out where the front headlight should be, and some kind of dispenser just above the back, well, that looked like it could drop mines. It was like an early Christmas gift. The Rampart Heavy Assault Cycle will be your primary method of transportation. A vehicle of my design. Its armor is a specially made lightweight version of Chobam armor. It can still reach speeds of 200 miles per hour and provide ample protection from both ballistic firearms and explosive ordnance. Its armaments include side-mounted Gatling cannons, back-mounted missile launchers with a high explosive radius, a forward-mounted cannon capable of firing armor-piercing 120mm Sabo rounds, and an anti-tank mine layer. The treads are made of an adhesive, magnetic material that can allow the Rampart to move up vertical surfaces. Additionally, the Rampart can activate the meat grinder functionality when it senses hostilities near its current vicinity. As if to demonstrate this, Vega activated the meat grinder function on the Rampart, and the studs covering the treads all sprouted razor-sharp spikes, while 2 scythe-like blades unfurled from 2 ports on each side of the bike. The Doomslayer sat in the seat and studied the controls, getting a good feel of what he was working with before turning his attention to the handprint scanner in the center console. He wondered how it would read his hand what with his armor covering his hand, but he guessed that it could still scan it either way. Getting up from the Rampart, The doomslayer went over to the fabricator tray that held all of his weapon mods. The charge burst for your combat shotgun now fires in a 5-round burst and reconfigures the shells into accurate slug rounds, while the explosive shot has a larger and more powerful blast radius. For your heavy assault rifle, the tactical scope now provides telemetry data that will allow you to pinpoint certain areas where you can ricochet your shots, and the micro missiles are now outfitted with heat seekers with a tighter targeting system. The Slayer smiled, taking the mods off the tray and into his hammerspace backpack. Your plasma rifle's heat blast has been modified to release a wider radius around yourself and is strong enough to melt solid steel, while the stun bomb can also affect machinery, permanently disabling them or causing them to malfunction. Your Gauss cannon has seen significant improvements. The Precision Bolt's telescoping sight can now allow you to see through most solid surfaces and can highlight targets via thermal imaging, while the Siege mode charges faster and fires in a 2-round burst. Those sounded downright fantastic. He was eager to test them out. The chain gun mods now have expanded versatility depending on the target. Mobile turret utilizes incendiary ammunition, while Gatling rotator can now fire explosive tipped fragmentation rounds. The rocket launcher's remote detonation now utilizes superheated shrapnel with a high chance of igniting its targets, while lock-on burst fires 5 rockets instead of 3, and an upgraded propulsion mechanism allows the rockets to travel faster. The Bane of Hell nodded approvingly as he pocketed the mods. Your posture indicates that you are questioning the need for all these modifications to your equipment. The Doomslayer tilted his head. Was he making it that obvious? Allow me to explain my motives in great detail. Through studies of the support items we have procured for my island, as well as reviewing the near-limitless capabilities of our fabricator, I have calculated that it is possible to build a functioning teleporter that can take us back to Mars. The Doomslayer's eyes widened. That was the best news he had heard since his arrival in this universe. While Vega initially confirmed that they were stuck here, to hear that there was a way back to the UAC facility honestly made him feel elated, probably for the first time in eons. He was itching to wring Hayden's cybernetic neck and get his crucible back to finish his vendetta against Hell and the Makers. Technically, the crucible back on Mars wasn't the real crucible. That was still back on Terra's Nabad, the Sentinel capital city on Argent Nur, still embedded in the corpse of the Titan he had killed. And that was before he got his Predator suit and became a demigod. Flynn felt himself grow sullen over the memory of Argent Nur. If the ruins he saw near the well were of any indication, that world had been claimed by the demons a long time ago. A world he failed to protect. The fabricator can create the parts needed to construct the teleporter, but due to the complexity of such an undertaking, it may take some time for the fabricator to create working mechanisms due to this universe not having the same technological level as the UAC despite their current advancements. I estimate that it could take well up to 70 years to manufacture the teleporter. That was of no consequence to the Slayer. The billions of years he spent in Hell rendered his perception of time fucked 8 ways to Sunday. Weeks felt like hours to him, and years felt like days. What was 7 more decades to his immortal body clock? However, there is a critical threat to this world that must be addressed. All for one. Deadling facsimile. The Slayer narrowed his eyes. The information I have downloaded from David Shield's personal computer has provided substantial information on the subject of this villain, but I have also uncovered more data on this topic. There are 2 very powerful quirks in this world that the HPSC has gone to great lengths to cover up. One for all, and all for one. The Slayer blinked when he recognized the relevance of those names. It was the motto of the 3 Musketeers. God, this world was weird. One for all is a transferable quirk that can be passed on from one user to the next, but the quirk can only be transferred to another person if the current wielder intends to pass it on. One for all allows the user to stockpile enormous amounts of raw power, allowing them to significantly increase a user's quirk or physical abilities to truly superhuman levels. Today, 2 people have this quirk, both of whom we have already met. The supercomputer monitors turned themselves on, showing photos of Toshinori Yagi, and to the Slayer's surprise, Izuku Midoriya. David's research notes, as well as additional information I have acquired. indicate that there have been 9 different inheritors of this quirk, Yagi and Izuku being the most recent additions. The photos of Izuku and Yagi panned out to reveal 7 black pictures, each with a question mark in the middle of them. I am unable to find any information on 5 of the past users, but David was able to identify 2 of them. 2 of the obscured photos flipped over to reveal their identities. A balding man wearing goggles on his forehead with a noticeably square jaw, and a dark-haired woman with sharp eyes and a small mole near the bottom of her lip. The screen then started to list down the information regarding them. Subject: Daigoro Banjo. Height: 6 feet 0 inches. Age: at time of death 38. Alias: Whiplash Hero Lariat. Quirk: Black Whip grants the user the ability to produce energy tendrils from any part of their body and command them at will. Current status: deceased. Cause of death: redacted. Subject: Nana Shimura. Height: 5 feet 8 inches. Age: at time of death 31. Alias: Indomitable Heroine Titanus. Quirk: Float allows the user to levitate and suspend themselves in midair. Current status: deceased. Cause of death: redacted. Although the causes of their deaths were rendered classified by the HPSC, David's notes, as well as his interaction with Yagi, have revealed that the previous users all met their end at the hands of All for One. The quirk he uses is the same as his namesake. It allows him to forcibly steal the quirks of whomever he touches rather than transfer said power, like One for All. This allows him to store multiple quirks at once for his personal use, though he can theoretically transfer stolen quirks to anyone, which would explain how Curator and Volcano were able to possess 2 different quirks. There is also unconfirmed documentation that All for One may be hundreds of years old due to a possible longevity quirk. This also presents the possibility that the dates of the other users' deaths go back further. The Doomslayer had his arms folded during the whole explanation, fingers drumming against his arm. He and Vega had stumbled onto something big. He had initially thought that All for One to be some diabolical mastermind, but this was something beyond his assumptions. This man was dangerous, far too dangerous to be left alive. All for One is primarily responsible for Toshinori Yagi's condition. From the medical records I have analyzed, I predict that Yagi will only have 2 years left to live before he dies from complete multiple organ failure. He stopped drumming his fingers just as the fabricator began to print out ammunition for his weapons. This was starting to become personal. From what I have gathered from the rest of David's findings, All for One plans are the complete abolishment of hero society, replacing it with one where villains and anarchy reign supreme. He has since then been christened the symbol of despair and seeks to acquire One for All. If he is successful in doing so, it could make him the most powerful living being on the planet. Because of this, I have deemed All for One's threat level to be on par with that of an extinction-level event, as my primary directive has been to aid human civilization and ensure its survival. We cannot allow All for One's continued existence. Make no mistake, I am still committed to getting back to the Mars facility and putting an end to Dr. Hayden's malfeasance, but until then, All for One must be terminated with extreme prejudice. The Doomslayer slammed his fist into his palm and cracked his knuckles. There was no argument here. He was all in on Vega's plan. Ever since finding out All for One was behind the Steel Sabers attacking Island, he had the urge to seek him out and eviscerate him for almost trying to kill everyone on that island, and now he would get his chance. Before the island, the Slayer felt like he had no goal or purpose in this world. Stopping the Sabers and the LOV was essentially a diversion, but now he had a real objective: kill All for One. If 7 different generations of One for All users couldn't stop this guy, then it was up to him to finally put an end to this centuries-long blood feud. Flynn glanced over his shoulder at the photos of Yagi and Izuku on the screen. He certainly wasn't going to let a dying man or a kid who was barely into his teens be next on AFO's hit list. Pinpointing All for One's location is easier said than done, however. He is more than likely a highly cunning individual who has gone to great lengths to conceal his base of operations. I have devised a plan to counteract this dilemma. We will lure All for One to us. The supercomputer we have built allows me to hack into any electronic devices in the greater Mizudafu area. I have gained access to multiple cell phone users who are part of small to moderate-sized villain gangs, but they all have direct ties to the League of Villains. By eliminating these groups and dismantling his operations, we will force All for One out of hiding and allow us to terminate him. Persistent upgrades that I will make to the supercomputer will allow me to expand my influence far beyond Mizutofu and locate additional targets of opportunity. Please be aware that our actions will not be overlooked by law enforcement or heroes. This will bring you into conflict with them, and you may need to resort to physical force to remove them from your path. Are you certain you wish to follow through with my strategy? The doomslayer nodded without hesitation. The superheroes of this world were too morally constrained to resort to lethal force, as was shown during the Island siege. They probably wouldn't be much help against All for One either. If they got in his way, then that was their choice to be beaten senseless. He just hoped Maruko wouldn't be one of them. Very well. Sending target coordinates to you. Now, Motley Crew DR feel good. The screens of the supercomputer were now showing maps of Mizutofu, with multiple red dots scattered all around. With his helmet scanning the locations and giving him coordinates, the Unchained Predator collected all of his ammo off the conveyor belt and went over to the rampart. Sitting himself down in the seat, he placed his hand on the scanner, and the motorcycle tank's 4 mufflers roared as the internal plasma engine breathed life into the vehicle. He gripped the handlebars and revved up the engine before accelerating the rampart out of the station and onto the train tracks. He raced through the holographic brick wall and into the deserted tunnels, his HUD showing which ones to follow that would take him to where he needed to go. After about a few minutes, the rampart sped out of a drainage tunnel and into a dried-up concrete channel just outside the Mizutofu city limits. He wheeled his ride up the slope and onto a street corner where he thundered towards the city, ready to begin his hunt for the League of Villains. All Might was seen as the symbol of peace. All for One considered himself to be the symbol of despair. The Doomslayer would become the symbol of vengeance for villains all across Japan. To be continued. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed Support the Writer. Don't forget to like, sub, and share.